And another day, another Junior Speed Chess Championship match. I'm Grandmaster Robert Hess. Alongside me, as per usual, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. Danya, yesterday we had an absolute thriller of a match between Nihal Sar and Anton Smirnov. Today is going to get even better with our matchup between Sam Sevian and Alexei Sarana.
It just might, Robert, a pleasure to be commentating with you today, and another amazing day of action up ahead. These players, and I say this every day, and I really mean this every day, these players are incredible. Every match holds the potential to be just edge of your seat entertainment, and so far every match has delivered. And Robert, knowing these players, there's absolutely no reason to believe that this match also will not deliver.
Oh, it certainly will. And we have our Smarter Chess match predictions, which are brought to us by Chess Goals. See, it's a pretty even balance here. A 55% favorite is Sam Sevian, and that comes in both the longest time control. It says a 4.5, 3.5 prediction in his favor in the 5+1. He is expected to go down a game in the 3+1, but then win the bullet by 1. So that's like as back and forth a matchup as you could ask for.
They are very evenly matched, as indicated by their blitz and bullet ratings. They both play a lot on Chess.com. They're blitz and bullet veterans, so there's going to be no sort of experience gap there, and we'll definitely keep an eye on the Smarter Chess predictions as the match goes along. But first, Robert, very important tournament that's coming up.
Oh yeah, and it's coming up tomorrow. I'm losing track of the days here, but tomorrow is the Speed Chess Super Swiss, $15,000 in prize money. I'm sure there will be many Super Grandmasters taking part, and it's for an opportunity to qualify for the Speed Chess Championship. So the players in this field in the JSCC, as we take a look at the overall bracket, they have an opportunity to qualify directly. The person whose face and name goes underneath that trophy down there, who wins this JSC bracket, they will make their way to the Speed Chess Championship, but other players will have a chance by participating in the Super Swiss this weekend. And Donna, as we do look at this bracket, we see that we have our final quarterfinal matchup, Sam Sevian and Alexei Sarana. If you're Jeffrey Zhang, who would you prefer to face?
Nobody. I would prefer it to be Karpov when he faced Fischer. I mean, I think that he probably has a preference on the basis of who he faced more over the board or who he knows better. I guess would be he faced Sevian more times over the board. He knows him a little bit better. But Alexei Sarana is a household name at this point. He is, of course, Russian, but he's played across the globe. He played recently in St. Louis, so I'm sure Jeffrey is familiar with both of them. And they have somewhat different styles. I think what makes this match really interesting is the fact that Sevian and Sarana, I know them pretty well, both of them, and they have divergent sort of styles and approaches to the game, which we'll talk about. And I think that will produce some very interesting chess.
Yeah, for sure. And they're both super tough. So when we ask who would Jeffrey rather play, it's kind of like, oh, who is the weaker player? Actually, I think as far as our matchups go, this is a pretty good toss-up because if I'm remembering correctly, Sevian is around 2660 and Sarana around the same. I actually don't know who's the higher rated to in terms of classical FIDE ratings, but this is a tough matchup no matter who goes on to the semifinals. And Jeffrey, he looked great. He has looked great so far in the JSCC, but his opponent going forward will also be a great player. And we do have liftoff, Danya.
We do. And as you said, this match is bound to be about form. Both of these players, it really is a toss-up. So a lot will be determined in the early going here in the 5-minute. And one thing to note, Alexei Sarana is famous in Russia among the juniors as an opening specialist. He has incredible opening preparation. He is a specialist in using computers to find novelties. And I heard all of this from sort of the top Russian commentator, Grandmaster Sergei Shipov, who regularly sing Sarana's praises. So for Sevian, Robert, it's going to be very important to stick to what he knows and to spend some time in the opening, not get into any trouble, particularly with the black pieces, as we see in English here in the first game.
Right. And with the white pieces, we expect that, he should be able to get a slight pull. That's what these highly rated grandmasters usually do when they have the first move advantage. And right now, his knight on a4 looks a bit awkward, but it did drive this bishop back to a passive square on e7. So that's the good news, and that's why Sevian, I almost called him Konovets because I know his username so well. He drops his knight back to c3, saying my job has been done. And white has more advanced pawns on the in the center over here. So what do you make of this dynamic, and how are the players going to push forward from here?
Yeah, this is a very interesting position. It has overtones of a sort of old Indian structure, which is, of course, kind of like the King's Indian, where the bishop goes to e7. I think, by and large, Sarana has solved most of his opening problems. I think one idea for Black here is to go rook e8, bishop f8, and to retool his pieces that way. It's important not to take on e4 prematurely, because then Black exposes the weakness on d6. So White does have the space advantage. Sevian could deploy his other bishop to b2 or to e3. And he decides instead to lock up the center. Interesting. And we see a lot of tension here in the center. The winner of this central tension, I think, is going to be the one who gets the clear advantage here as they transition into the middle game, Robert.
Yes, and it's important that neither player has captured just yet, because when you do capture something, you want to make certain that it benefits you in some way. And look at this tension remain on the c6 and d5 squares. And now it's all about the queen trade. Do you take on b6, which gives Black double pawns, but you are capturing towards the center, or do you play bishop e3? So he does take, and he plays e4, so he's playing for central control.
Yeah.
But Daniel, we know full well that anytime you push this pawn to e4, the bishop on g2 looks a lot less potent
What are you talking
behind
about?
the wall
That's
pawns.
amazing bishop. I don't know why you're having a problem with this bishop right here. There's only a lot of squares. But yeah, h4, bishop h3. This definitely does have these King's Indian-y kind of vibes. And it's very easy to just assume that White is much better because he has a lot more space. I think White is better. I think because White does have a lot more space. I don't think White's advantage is vast. And I think what Sarana has to do is find some way to contest White's authority in the center.
Right.
I'm not loving, though, his own bishop on h5 is kind of out of play, Robert. I mean, f5 always opens up White's bishop, not to mention it's currently just not possible because of e takes f5, rook takes f5, and then g4. So This is unpleasant stuff here for Sarana.
I'm with you. I was focusing on how e4 limits the scope of White's bishop on g2, but as you're mentioning, the bishop on h5, which likely is going back to g6, doesn't look so great either. And yes, Black can play f6 and move the bishop back somewhere, but even if it goes back on that diagonal, it's not actually doing all that much. And another thing that I really like from Sevian's point of view is that a knight c5 move can be met by b4. So it's not like this knight can just sit happily on c5. No. White is going to kick that knight out. So rook 8 seems like a good starting point for Sarana, but I like your move h4. I'd play that right now because bishop g4 does not take back the diagonal, as then White plays f3 and says, get out of here, my bishop's coming to h3 where I'm starting to pester your knight, and your pawn on b6 could become a target.
Right, and instead, Sam has decided to play rook c2, which is sort of a multi-purpose move, and now Sarana brings his other rook into the queen side. I like the positioning of that rook on a8. It's sort of clamping down on that file. It's immobilizing White's knight. And here comes h4. Now bishop h3 is even more potent because it pins the knight to the rook. So serious problems continue to be posed here by Sam.
Yeah, just not a comfortable position to play for Sarana. He does play knight to c5, so I was mentioning that b4 can be played, but I don't think he'll play it right now because b4, you have to calculate what happens with knight to d3. The knight's jumping in. It looks like it's wandered too far and could even maybe get trapped there. But the problem is, and I'll just put this on the board, is like, oh, he plays bishop h3, but if b4, some kind of knight d3, maybe I'll play c5 and get my knight back to b4. So it's not so easy for White to continue and to contain that knight on d3.
But if the rook comes to c7, then if we play b4, knight d3, we can take on b6. And guess what? It's not about the pawn. The rook is simply trapped. So nice Sarana point. Goes rook b8 precisely because of that. Not a move that you play easily. You play this move with a heavy heart. Now, Sevian could consider taking on c6 and then running that pawn to b5 and trying to weaken the d5 square. I don't love that strategy because that makes a lot of concessions. It lets Black's knight, as you said, occupy that nasty d3 square, so I'm not sure about that. Maybe go rook d2 first. But a big decision here as Sevian goes f3, preferring that more measured approach, making these marginal improvements to his position, just because I don't see a good plan for Alexei here.
Yeah, the only plan I can think of is a knight a4 type of maneuver at some point, saying, let me trade off your really good knight or potential great knight on c3. As you mentioned, this idea of taking on c6, playing b4, b5 at standard to give me the d5 square. But if I play knight a4, well, then I'm trading off your knight before it can ever get to d5. So that's one thing I'm considering. Bishop d8 rerouting the bishop to protect the pawn on b6 is another. But black is just more passive here, Danya. And if I'm white, I may even consider b3. You're not making any progress. You're not playing knight a4. You're not trading knights. Then I'll go king f2. I'll go king e2. And I'll just perfect my pieces before you can do much of anything. And that is why Sarana plays knight a4.
But now if you take on a4, rook a4, I was trying to make a move such as bishop to d7, where the problem is, again, that the a2 pawn hanging is quite a... Now, maybe dc and then bishop d7, because knight takes c3 can be met with bc.
Oh, you're saying in the initial position. Let me get back here. So
okay, but now again, bishop d7. There we go. I don't like this as much, though, because of c5.
But it's interesting, because white can play like a4 and say, you're never doing anything on the queen side. I can eventually play b4. And the side that controls the pawn breaks is often the side with the advantage. Not always, but very often. And so if I play a4, that does tie my bishop down, though, to that a4 pawn. Not that the bishop has anywhere else to go at this current moment. I'm just thinking that, if I play a4, I cannot play b4 unless my bishop stays defending that pawn.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Sarana has been played very quickly. He's got 2 minutes, right about 2.5 minutes remaining. And it's one of those cases, it's not like he doesn't care. It's just that he, in a certain sense, there's nothing that he can do. So it's easier for him to just shuffle his pieces around, whereas Sevian has to time the moment when he breaks through correctly. He's under a minute now. Sarana sort of insinuating that he might want to play f5, which complicates the equation for sure. So b4 maybe can even be met with f5.
That's true. And f5, as you're saying, most importantly, it complicates things. And even if you play f6, a tamer move, and then try to go bishop to e8 to trade off that bishop on d7, what I don't like about f6 is that this king on g1 may work its way to g4 if the bishops get traded and into the light squares. That's something that I have a long-term vision of. And so f5 does look much more to the point and creates a problem for white. Actually, f5 now looks great because you can even take with the rook on f5. So
Sarana instead preferring rook to d and below 30 seconds is Sevian. It's not a particularly difficult position to play for white either. Of course, he could shuffle his pieces around. But if Sarana drops his rook back, does he want a5?
This bishop on b5 can't move, right?
Yeah.
So he plays
f5. How do you defend the pawn? That was missed for sure by Sam.
That's a big blunder.
That is a blunder. He's going to have to drop e4 and go f4. The fortunes have changed completely. Look at the time situation, Robert. 2 minutes extra on the clock, and he sacks the exchange.
Wow, he sacks the exchange trying to make the claim that black can't do much of anything. And he's right if white gets a few moves. If this king gets to e4, no, black is really stuck, and white's king can become active and help into an initiative. So king h7 played, and
h5. But then bishop g5. So every single one of these moves involves a concession. He does bring his king in toward the center. I like that exchange sack, but it has to be handled very precisely if white is to play for a win here. I don't even know if he can.
I think that black needs to try some kind of h5, g5, like break open the king side, and the bishop on b5 still cannot move down here. So that's the good news for Sarana. Even though his pieces aren't doing all that much yet, he's up on the clock. He has the potential to play a move like g5. If you play g5, you made the great point that white pushes through to h5. Then can you play g4, put the king on e4, and say you're not making any progress whatsoever. And if this rook moves away from d8, there's bishop back to d7, and that could be a bit annoying. So he plays h5. I think he's trying to play for a g5.
Yeah, and Sam is very good in time pressure. I've noticed this throughout his blitz games. He goes a5, very brave, breaking through, continuing to break through. Now, if c takes b4, I guess he wants to take on b6 with the bishop. So Sarana trying to hold things together. Let's see how this unfolds. Rook a3 maybe?
Rook a3 looks good. Just keeping that king on e4 in a bit of danger.
6 is an idea, but potentially sacking the bishop, creating, even especially now, as his bishop heads to b4 instead.
Yeah, and I'm looking at rook to 8. Wait, there's rook takes f3 here because the bishop on f6 had an e4 check.
You devil.
I'm just trying to find
really interesting
mating patterns and tactics, and that was one of them. We can show that after the game, but I don't even know if that was that great for black because of those bishop sacrifices you kept talking about.
Rook c4 should be considered here, by the way, on the same note. Rook takes b5, sorry, and then rook c4 check.
Okay.
Or even bishop d8 there. I think rook takes b5 might be very strong here.
I see your point because the pawns are doubled in the b file, and then black's rook can scoop things up. And bishop d8 played, and
threatening rook takes
f4. Can you play f4 at some point for white?
You have to. There's otherwise there's some mating overtones. I think
f4 now.
There it goes.
There's like some attack potentially against that black king.
Now who's going to get checkmated now? Rook f4, but bishop f6. Robert, I think he missed that.
He did. But he can still take on f4 with the rook and play g4. So I'm not sure if... Wait, but then you have to calculate rook takes b5, rook c4 check, and then the end game. Like, too much going on here.
Shouldn't be worse for white, I think.
So rook b5, cb, rook c4 check, trade the rook.
G5 is interesting. G5, h4.
Oh, and then you are threatening to get into those.
I think g5 is very strong here.
That's a nice way to break free there. But g5, there might even be rook f5.
But gh.
Yeah, you're
rook
right.
Rook g5 check, and rook g5 is important. Now rook h8 and wins.
Rook h8. Rook h8 is just great.
He had to give a check on g5 first in order to draw the king away so it doesn't support that square. But now, will Sevian drum up any kind of counterplay against black's king? I don't see it.
No, the king actually is sitting fine on g6, and you have a lone rook. The bishop's getting back into the game, but push that pawn to h2.
Yeah, and b6 falls. Sarana goes back around to take it. Sam trying to create counterplay, but he just doesn't have enough pieces on the board. Rook d4.
Serrano's time management was stellar.
Amazing. But wait a minute. Now that pawn is defended by the bishop. I'm not sure. Okay, both so many pawns. h2, I think, should just be played at some point.
Yeah, just play h2.
Alexei just needs to
He's gonna
buy the rook down. And now, wait a second. He hasn't played h2.
Oh, and he lost the c pawn.
But now he does.
Oh, bishop e4 check. What the fuck sequence? That's awesome. Barely got the move off. Bishop h1. Oh, king here, but no, that can't hold. Rook d1. Okay, take on d7 first is prudent, but rook d1 was a possibility. Rook d4.
Sam is so resilient.
Oh my gosh, that g-pawn got really far too.
It did, but rook g8 and he's going to pick it off.
Yeah, rook h6, trying to take on it. Well, so he's giving himself a chance. So Sevian is doing all he can to stay in this game as long as possible. And if somehow this pawn drops from b4, then you're not winning this game anymore.
We saw this in yesterday's match in some of these exchange down positions when you can't make progress, all of a sudden you blunder your pawn and boom goes the dynamite.
For sure. And look at Sarana's doing a ladder with his rooks. Oh, he pre-moved bishop e2. Bad pre-move there.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very, very hard to defend that for a long period of time. And Sarana keeping his foot on the gas pedal. Fantastic time management that time by Alexei.
Yeah, that was a really fun game there. And I don't think if you're Sevian, you can be that upset. There's some first games you lose where you're just really frustrated and you can even start tilting as early as after the first game. But that felt like a true battle, you know?
Absolutely. It had its ups and downs. He extracts the lessons, maybe slightly better time management. And here we have a very topical line of the Nimzo. This looks crazy, but it's very well studied. I myself am not up to date, but Sevian has to be careful going to these topical lines, although he himself, let's not underestimate his preparation, which is absolutely stellar as well.
Didn't we see this in a previous match?
We did. I'm trying to put my finger on which one it was.
Wait,
this definitely did.
This just doesn't look good for Black. What if I just go... What's the count? Yeah, FG and opening the rook up.
The end of the day, I'm going to win the piece back, and Black's king is just going to be a lot more exposed than White's.
Right. And actually, FG had the added benefit of just, bringing your rook into the game.
I don't understand why not FG, honestly.
Giving you the F5 square, your rook can come to F4. That looked much better. But HG, I think that's the move that you're trained to do, right? Since you're a kid.
G2, rook H1, maybe he wants?
But it doesn't quite feel
agree.
quite as good. And what I was going to say is, like, your coaches, right? When you're a kid, and these players are still quite young, but your coach is like, you take towards the center. You take with the H-pawn, but we know that when you're under attack, you often take away from the center to open up your rook for not just an aggressive plan, but for a line of defense. So now knight capture on E5. Down it, you could take on B4, but I'm guessing the F3 square in particular, and knight G4 coming with queen H2 threats.
Wouldn't it be great, Robert, if there was a rook on F1 that was perhaps controlling the F3 square?
Oh, and if the queen on C2 were protecting H2?
That was not a possibility, was it?
Not really.
Sarana acting like a good Russian schoolboy, but maybe a little bit too dogmatically. And by the way, I just wanted to put that out there. Technically, I think it's pronounced Sarana with the accent on the last A.
Okay.
But that's hard to say, so I'm just going to keep saying Sarana. It's a bit of an unusual last name.
No. I always prefer being accurate with the pronunciation, so Sarana is what we're going to say. It's
not as unusual as people may think. It's similar to the Russian word sarancha, which means locust. So
well,
that's a fun fact.
He's trying to plague Sevian's chances of making it to the Speed Chess Championship.
Oh, man. That was high level.
I'm just, Danya, I'm just letting you know that I'm here. We're our partners in crime in this commentary team. So I am just trying to play ball.
No, you are playing ball. Speaking of which, we still need to play ball at some point.
True.
I need to beat you at horse. Anyways, now knight f3, knight h4 is a perpetual, I think.
Wow. Yeah, because I'll show that knight f3 check. King has to go to g2, knight h4 check. If you ever take, then I have queen g4, queen h4, queen g4, etc. Right? Your king goes back and forth. My queen does the same. This song and dance ends in a repetition.
Right. Now, Sevian definitely sees it. He has it in his pocket. In these situations, why do I feel like I'm sort of unintentionally?
I was thinking you sounded like Gary, even though you weren't trying to.
In these situations, you want to, take all of your time, and try to, think about, how you want to play for a win, maybe. But I think, you do take all of your time. There's no reason not to, because white literally cannot avoid the repetition. Rook c8 should be considered. You could even take on e6, but there white goes bishop e4, and there's knight g4 ideas as well, Robert. Maybe fe, I guess bishop e2, but that looks a little bit scary as well.
But you're right that after f takes e6, you should play bishop e2 because that takes away f3 from the knight, but also g4, while of course attacking the queen on h5. So that would be good. And then the problem for black is, well, endgames are worse for you. Your pawn structure is shattered. So that's the potential downside of playing on, is that you have a risk in the long term, whereas you have this short-term initiative. So I think Sevian's doing the right thing here. He is spending a good chunk of time, and I get the feeling, he'll play knight f3 and
it's prudent.
Make the draw. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think that what were you saying about your feeling?
Yeah, this is exactly what I thought was going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think you're trained as a tournament player. When you're playing these GM tournaments, you're usually fine with a draw with black. And we saw that Sevian got an advantage out of the opening with white. So there's no reason at this point in the match to go wild and to do something, imprudent. He's on the board, he gets the white pieces, and we see here another English.
We do indeed. And just wanted to give a shout out to all our viewers. It's early in this match. We still have well over an hour of the longest time control left. But just want to say, hey, welcome back. If you've been watching the JSCC, if you're new, hey, hope you're enjoying it and keep on watching. So we have, Danya, the same exact line. Who do you think in the future will change it up first and say, I'm not playing this exact English line anymore?
I know that Sevian has been playing the English a lot in recent months and years. Right now the ball is squarely in Alexi's court because he got a passive position in the first game. I think that we're going to see less total change of openings and more modification. So Sevian might change the line of the English that he plays, such as maybe for e3 or a3, and Alexi might deviate, let's say, from knight to d4. Knowing these players are very principled, so I think we're going to see in opening variation rather than total change of openings. That's just, that I'm just going from instincts here. Of course, we could see a lot of different things. Again, I like white's position here. I think the central tension, we might have seen this exact position, queen b3, was played in a position like this. It just seems to me that it's harder to play for black.
I'm with you. And the other game, actually, the queen went to b3 before black went queen b6, and then Sam traded there. So slight difference, but I'm based on your major point there is I would agree with you. We saw Jeffrey Zhang play d4 and then play e4. He changed his opening on the very first move. And Arjun, his opponent, played some Caro-Kann lines and then ended up playing the French. So those are some big changes, whereas you're saying we won't see that kind of switcheroo. We'll see a modification, so on move 5 instead of on move 1.
Also because Sarana is a Najdorf expert. He plays essentially exclusively the Najdorf against 1e4, which is partially why Sevian, I think, is not going into that opening, because he is an e4 player. He wants to avoid Sarana's preparation in the Najdorf. And against d4, I think Alexi also plays sort of almost exclusively the Slav. So it really depends on who these players are in tournament chess as well. With Jeffrey, he plays a lot of different stuff even in tournaments, and that obviously reflects on player's choice in the Speed Chess Championship.
For sure. And Dunny, I want to make one point about this game that's different from the first is, well, now black is taken on b3. So that's a big difference. Black was one with the double pawns, now it's white. But also this rook came to c8 from the kingside rather than the queenside rook, and that's because Sarana led with queen to b6, and that's important. And just to go back a couple moves here, as if Sevian had taken on b6, now that rook is already on a8 where it's meant to be, and the rook is on the c file, whereas in the first game he brought rook a to c8 and then had to bring his rook back to a8 and then bring his rook from f8 to c8. So it took unnecessary time. So Sarana actually has made an improvement, I would say, over that first game. He takes on d5. He is not afraid of e takes d5 because we have an asymmetrical pawn structure in that case. And after e takes d5, maybe the bishop gets to g6, and there's even bishop c2 on the docket going for the b3 pawn.
That was very incisive explanation, but I need to share with you a joke.
Okay, go for it.
How does Alexei, Grandmaster Alexei, preserve his food for long periods of time? He uses the Sarana rep.
You know, I was hoping you would make a Sarana na 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 like reference instead.
Oh, okay. That would have been a different way, but I keep close to the actual names.
Wait, how is that? That is the, you know.
But Sarana and Havana, like you're arbitrarily replacing a word with another word that deviates from it entirely.
I'm just letting you know that.
Look,
you know,
if
that
this
was available.
Was a contest, I would Saran away with it. I would have Saran away with it a long time ago.
Nope, we're not letting that happen. Anyway, Danya, talk to us about the chess. The bishop's on h3 now.
It is, and here's the issue. If black plays g6, white can consider going f3 and literally just going after that bishop on h5, threatening g4. If Alexei goes, well, he goes rook f8, but here's the problem. Now that rook is tied down to the pawn, and Sevian could consider going either b4 or rook f to c1 to prepare b4. So he's basically playing on both fronts, and black's resources are stretched very thin, much like So will Alexei actually be able to keep everything together? I think so, because b4, Robert, has a downside. b4, rook a c8, and white might have a hard time keeping that c4 pawn defended, because if b3, then you could play b5, trying to exploit that newly undefended knight on c3. So again, we saw in the first game, Sevian take a lot of time in a moment like this, and again, Sarana is up a lot of time on the clock. f4, very interesting move. He continues to operate on the king side.
Do you agree with that comment that I should get employee of the month because I have to put up with your jokes? But actually what you were saying was really important, because b4 c5, that's a typical idea in a position of this nature, but you have to watch out for the c4 pawn. And typically your bishop is not on h3, your bishop is somewhere defending that pawn, so you feel free to move the pawn to b4. So this has the vibes of a Sicilian, right? Where
it does.
You took on d5 at some point, and white took back with the e-pawn and tries to go for the queenside pawn majority. And I like black's position, because the bishop on h5 may look a bit awkward, but now that this pawn is on f4 and cannot go to f3 to try to trap the bishop, that's an annoying bishop that at some point can even get into a square like e2 and put some pressure on the c4 pawn.
I do see what you're saying. I agree. I also like the way that Sevian has handled this, placing that rook on c1 to lend reinforcement to the knight on c3. Now, if rook c8, he can very freely play b. Well, it's happened. I guess let's see what Sarana has cooked up here. Maybe bishop d8, bishop b6. That's a pretty typical idea. Instead, he goes rook c7. And what he has to watch out for, Robert, is that c5 breakthrough, which can come even if that means sacrificing a pawn. Sometimes c5 followed by d6 can happen. I'm not saying here, but Sarana is just preparing b5 here. That's actually surprisingly hard to deal with. The knight on c3 is still very loose. Maybe Sevian goes b5, but that in turn yields the c5 square.
Right. And honestly, I was looking at f takes e5, because if you take with the knight, there could be some bishop b6. But the problem is, look at these light squares that knight is about to jump into. It can just give you an immediate fork. So that doesn't quite pan out for white, I imagine. And he plays bishop to g2 first, covering the f3 square. And the bishop wasn't doing anything on h3, staring into a pawn that was defended. So there's a lot of tension here. And if b5, which is
then
your
c5.
idea, well, can I consider taking it? Like, I'll give you my knight, but then get a pass pawn on a6.
That's a very deep idea, actually. That's a very deep idea, because you have that pawn on a6 in the end.
Right. So if I trade you here and then take on a6, now I have these runners on the queen side.
Oh crap! I got the memo. And don't compliment Robert Hess's ideas. Keep forgetting.
Yeah,
Sorry,
you're a
but
little
that is
late
a
on that
nice
one.
move.
Hey, well, you know me, Danya. I'm happy to sacrifice other people's pieces. And
Absolutely.
the B5 plan that you've been highlighting for a long time, I've been thinking about it while you're talking about other things. I've been just considering how am I going to react to that. And if I do play C5, I'm not sure I get. Oh, you drop your bishop
Okay.
back to
Bishop
F1.
F1.
Okay,
So
that
he's
also
sort
makes
of.
perfect sense.
It does. Now the question is, can Alexei now turn up the knob on the pressure? Now, I considered briefly the sacrifice on C4. I don't think it is warranted because when the C file opens, White could land a rook on C7 with disastrous effect. So, for example, BC, let's say you take on C4 twice. White has the move knight A2 at the end. So Sarana plays bishop F6. He does find a way to increase that pressure on the knight on C3. But now, Robert, C5 and D6 has to be considered sort of even more carefully because that pawn on D6 will be undefended by a bishop that used to be on E7. And he does play C5.
It's a great point that you've allowed me to push to D6, so let's go for it. And
BC
rook
at the
C6
end.
only move.
Uh-oh, and knight C5, there's knight D5.
Right.
The wheels
Tactics.
start coming off.
Tactics everywhere. And there could
Not
be...
B4.
Oh, and there's also knight B4. Like knight C5, knight D5. I'm hitting your bishop. I'm threatening to even take on C5 and play D7 in some ways. I'm threatening knight to B4 to kick your rook from the defense of the knight. This is just winning, honestly.
It is. The only thing is the time situation. So we're not trying to complicate things, but he definitely underestimated the power of a knight that lands on D5.
So can you get away with this? It just doesn't look like it. I mean, this knight D5 move is so obvious.
I mean, I don't see what else he can do. I mean, he can go bishop F3, but that is a very temporary bulwark against with the pressure. I mean, White could go B4, King F2. I mean, that's not a sustainable defense.
Is there a difference that he thrown EF4 so that the H4 pawn is hanging? So that's a big difference because in these lines with knight to D5, maybe I will have some kind of bishop takes H4, which not only attacks the rook and traps it, but defends the D8 square in case you push it. Okay, I just saw the evaluation bar just whoop, so that was a bad move.
Whoa. That I did not see. That is a very good catch.
What if I take it and play bishop D4 and then...
Right. Yeah, it's all about that one pass pawn and then rook E7. No, that's a crushing idea, I think, Robert.
Yeah, because you rook E8 check first even, and then it just...
But he's... Okay.
That's a good move,
I could see a case being made for that because now C6 is a devastating threat.
Right. So C6 is devastating. You can... Okay.
Takes a bishop D4.
Exactly. You walked into the fork.
And Sarana realizes that you can tell by that pause.
Yeah.
It's over.
And I can't tell if he's in hot water because of the game or because of the sauna that seems to be in his background. But either way, here we see that White is up a piece. And trading off is not going to help. Down goes A6, bishop B6 first. You take on A6. You're going to take on B5 in the second. And your B pawn will grow.
Yeah. And the technique... And I've been impressed throughout the JSCC matches by the technique, conversion technique of these players, which is sort of traditionally something that young players sometimes struggle with, but not in this tournament. Their technique, their positional understanding has been superb throughout. With that being said, we're at 3 seconds. He's got to demonstrate some precision here as the king has made its way to B5, a commanding blockading post. Now G5.
Yeah, what about G5?
Whoa.
Then bishop E7. Oh, wait.
Whoa.
Okay.
Oh, bishop C3. But is this winning? Because the pawns... This is not going to be easy, by the way. F4 and black just stays put. If the king takes on G5, then the pawn rushes to F2 and distracts the bishop.
Yeah, you're right. And you were just complimenting the technique. So wait, the evaluation bar just...
What did he... Wait!
It's too slow!
It was King D5.
No, King D5 was the wrong way.
B5 is a draw.
We need...
a draw?
Let's look at their faces because...
Unbelievable.
Oh my gosh,
After a miraculous... Wait, was I missing anything, Robert? King B5 is just a draw.
It was. I'm going to bring up that analysis board because...
Oh, my lands.
Disbelief by Sarana there. He just... like, what happened? And we're getting a repeat of the opening. So let's bring up quickly that position because King D5 was a major mistake. He was bringing his king closer to his pawns, but he needed to stay attached to the B4 pawn. If King F5, you had pointed this out, Danya, that you just jettison this pawn and you win the B4 pawn, and that's a draw. King and bishop cannot checkmate king. So that was a missed opportunity. Just one more time. Back here, he went to d5. No, because his king wasn't attached to his pawn. So in that sequence, just to finish that off, now I can just take, bring my bishop back, and win with my passed pawn. So an unfortunate series of events there for Sarana. We get back to the live position, and whoa, we had a repeat of the line, and something has changed here.
He has taken C3. HG, but again, this looks very, very dubious for black.
Well, he took on d7 first. The last time he took on c3, and then there was bc, fg, or something like that, and then he took with the h pawn. Here he took on d7 first, and now this has changed where black doesn't have that knight coming to e5. So what is this line? The evaluation bar, I see it off to the side here, says it's in black's favor. I don't imagine that trading queens could ever be good for black because I just trade G7 and then take on b4. So that leaves king g7, rook h8, and checkmate down the h file.
I mean, I still don't understand why white didn't play fg earlier. I mean, it seems like he's setting himself up for that attack on the h file. Clearly, there is a reason for it that, I just don't fully understand because I'm not, knowledgeable enough in this line. After king g7, Robert, the more I look at this position, initially I thought white is the one attacking, but white is the one making a lot of noise. But as you said, once a rook lands on h8, black doesn't need to make a lot of noise. All he can do is just deliver checkmate.
Yeah, well, the noise is, once you tune it out and you just let it play itself through, it's like, well, what does it actually help you? You would want to put this pawn back on h7. Whoa, e6. What is happening in this game?
Something tells me this is some Sarana home cooking.
What if I just take it?
Yeah, or not. What if you take it?
Well, I'm really trying to figure this out. That wasn't meant as like...
G6 is an idea to force the queen trade, but after queen takes, bishop takes c3.
Right. So I don't take the bishop right away. I take the pawn. I'm hitting multiple things, and I'm going to take your bishop next move. You want to explain e6 to me a little more? What's the downside of pawn takes e6? Because I still have rook h8 ideas. I'm still attacking your pawn on c3, which is pinned.
I think I know what Sevian is trying to determine, and that is, what is the downside of f takes e6?
There must be something, because the pawn is on e6, the 7th rank is open, so maybe there's some kind of like queen b2, queen b7, or rook b1, rook b7, where there's like a problem.
Or it's a bluff.
Or it could just be a bluff, but I'm trying to work my way through this, and look at Sarana's time. He spent 8 seconds for the entire game.
Definitely, I don't think it's a bluff. Well, we're about to find out. Buckle your seatbelts.
Oh, and look at that. So, by the way, I just noticed the evaluation bar. It went to zeros, and before it was like -1.5.
Really?
So something in this line, the engine, relatively low depth, right? I'm just trying to assist everybody to see, can't catch up with our words. You can just see on the screen who's better. It's queen caught up to, now it's zeros.
I think queen e2 might survive. Because queen e2... if queen takes c2, knight takes c2, and very importantly, the knight defends, well, it doesn't actually defend the c3 pawn, but if bishop takes c3, white doesn't have to waste time moving his rook. He can take the bishop.
So why was e6 necessary in that equation? Oh, I see the big difference. If queen e2, queen takes h7, the difference is you no longer control the g4 square, and I also have the e5 square available to me. So if I take and you try rook h8, I may have some queen e5 checks or queen g4 checks, and that may save the day.
Right. I mean, I find it hard to believe. This definitely was not in Sarana's preparation. E6 was just a move he kind of threw out there. I think he is going to find queen e2 just by process of elimination. I don't see any other way to even reach a playable position. I think all other moves you can essentially resign.
Well, what about this rook?
Queen d1, same idea.
But I mean, now I look at the bar and says -2.6. So that was
not as good of an execution, I think, because now queen takes h7 and rook h8 does look very scary, Robert.
But there's still this g4 square you have to deal with.
Okay, but queen g4, I'll move the king, and if you go queen h4, I'll take it and go rook g8 and checkmate you.
A lot to consider here. A lot to consider, right? We're talking about queen takes h7, and the queen does get to g4, but Danya's saying that he's very quick on the h file, which is totally fair.
Even in the event of a queen trade, that king on g1 is confined. It could go rook g8 check down the open g file, drive the king to the h file, and deliver a ladder checkmate. So,
Danya, there's not even queen g4. I mean, look at this. Queen h7, c takes b. If you go queen g4 check first, you go king h8. C takes b4, e5. Whoops.
Oh, that's beautiful. And you just go after the piece. Yeah.
I'm going after the piece. And if you take immediately on b4, I have e5 to start with, taking away your check on g4. So the queen on e2 was essential to stop e5 from being played, because now the bishop covers the diagonal. Here comes rook h8. If your knight moves, I also have bishop c6 going for checkmate.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And
ooh.
Is knight f5 a move here?
Knight f5. Who are you?
I'm Dr. Tancred.
Can I move my king to
g8?
g8.
It's important to move it to g8, but then queen g4 check and queen d4 check. Ah, I see. I think so. Queen g4 check, king h8.
Okay, let's
queen d4 check.
So knight f5 check. Let's start here.
Right.
What if I just take on f5? Oh, you're gonna take and then go queen d4 check.
Yeah, exactly.
So like here, let's show everybody here. Check, rook f7, queen d4. You get the bishop back, and now white's.
I'm going to be frank here. I think Alexi's just not spending enough time evaluating the tactical subtleties. He's just, he's making these tempting moves, and he's sort of relying on Sevian's doubt in the fact that it's as clear as it seems to be. But Sevian is confident in himself. He is going to call Sarana's bluff, and this is going to backfire. There is enough time in the 5-minute portion to do that. So I'm really not a big fan right now of the strategy of playing really fast and not really doing a lot of calculation. I think this is really, really bad for white.
I'm with you, Danya, and I think that in these type of variations, because some people are like, hey, can you show me the sharpest lines? I want to checkmate my opponent. But in these super sharp lines, there are situations where if you make one inaccuracy, not even a blunder, right? It's not like Sarana blundered a piece. No, he just missed an idea. He's still up a pawn in the position. But as we see to the left of the screen here, he's busted. And so that's the problem with playing these really sharp lines, is you could just fall apart instantly. Whereas if you play a closed position where you're slightly worse, yeah, you'll suffer, but you may not have the same risk of just having the game end in a couple turns. So that's just the trade-off, I would say, stylistically. Sarana is a very aggressive player, and he plays sharp, long theoretical lines. We saw him do that against Magnus Carlsen in the Isle of Man, where he went into this end game from a Sicilian and tried to outplay Magnus from there. The game ended in a draw, but here it is clearly backfired.
Yeah, I mean, even the most well-prepared players, it's easy to confuse and forget stuff given the amount of variations and openings that any professional player has to keep in his mind, especially a professional player who has a repertoire as topical and sharp as Alexei does. So it's understandable, but I agree. I think he needs to modify his opening approach slightly. He's a d4 player. He's going to continue playing d4, but maybe going into a somewhat less sharp line. I'm sure he has something in reserve. As he dips below a minute here, he's just not finding anything, and I don't think anything exists. There's just too many threats against white's king and against that open h file.
Yeah, it's funny. Like knight f3 to bring your knight to h4 to close things down. There's bishop g4, right? Just pin the knight and win it.
I guess bishop g4, knight g5 was something I was considering.
Oh my gosh, you're a frustrating guy.
Oh, but there's an amazing idea.
Okay, tell us.
Bishop g4 probably doesn't work.
Yeah,
knight g5.
Yep.
And now it definitely doesn't work. I was going to take on d1. And knight takes h7. I was going to go bishop f3.
Yeah, it doesn't work according to this.
It doesn't work because of knight g5. But if you take the rook, I just wanted to show that rook takes f8. There is no way to stop the idea of rook h8, rook h1. As slow as it is, I don't think there's any way to stop that, but it doesn't work.
Oh, well, we actually are seeing this variation. So knight g5 was played.
Yeah, but I wouldn't take the queen here. I would move the queen.
Queen h5.
But then knight e6.
Oh my gosh, you're just the most annoying.
But king f6. I would just do that and go king f6 and win the knight.
But you're finding all these tactical resources, but you're right. Knight e6, just king f6.
And what if f3 here?
F3, I think I could just take your knight.
I take yours. Your bishop.
And queen e3 check and queen e4 check and like rook c. I don't know. There must be some kind of mate, but
but then I have queen d7. So
no, it has to
go knight e6.
Yeah.
I think king f6 is important here.
So king f6 is good. If I run to the corner, you may have queen d7 stuff.
Right. It's hard to play down on the clock, and he's down below 20 seconds here. That is the danger of dipping so far down on the clock. He does go king f6.
And there's going to be bishop e6 like f4, so he has to be very careful.
Yeah.
f4.
That's
because
exactly
f5
what he
is a threat.
does.
The bishop is pinned.
Uh-oh.
Okay, 8
Alexei
seconds.
Is so good
What
at
a move! what a move in time to it, giving up the
just
e5 pawn for free.
stabilizing.
That's a great move there. And king comes to g6. You have
But
f5 under control. Yeah,
F5
just
and
take
rook
it.
ad1, Robert. This is not over.
I definitely don't think it's over, but at least he has found a way to make his king feel safer for the time being. The king can slide back to h7. d7's under your control. No, he plays rook e6, trading off pieces.
Solid as a rock, but now if he trades and simply goes rook c1, king is not out of the woods. Well, neither king is out of the woods, obviously.
Oh, I don't like queen h5. That just feels like you're walking away from your king here. So queen f5
agree.
played, steals b7.
Now bishop b5 though. Rook e6, and he defends against the checks. Now white's king is the one who's going to come under fire.
Queen c8. Play queen c8. Oh, that didn't.
Yeah, he has too many threats here now. f5, but it's over.
Yeah, it wasn't time. What a crazy game that was.
Indeed.
Sarana almost worked his way out of that position. He went wrong somewhere. You know, he went astray from what the variations should look like, and it did get crazy. But credit to Sam Sevian, he held it together.
He did, and he found king f6. He took a good amount of time, but he trusted himself. You know, it's very easy to say, well, of course he found these simple moves, but you know, when you're in the heat of the moment, you're facing someone who is known as a theoretician, as someone who knows what he's doing in the opening. It's very easy to doubt yourself, and somebody who is able to remain confident, as Sevian did, deserves praise just for that. As we see, I guess I stand corrected. We see another repeat of the same exact line.
Yeah, you know, we're only moving 13, so it's not a big deal that they're just repeating the same line.
That's a huge deal, okay? It's a huge deal, Robert. That's all we want to talk about.
Oh, queen a4. No more queen b3 business. Okay, so there's pressure on the c6 pawn now. And does Sarana take on d5, or does he protect the c pawn?
Well, I like the idea of taking, because white can't really take with a knight. That e2 pawn is going to fall. But maybe cd. White does have g4. He does decide to keep the tension, though. And again, we see e4, which is a move we kind of discussed previously. But it's a bit of a different iteration here with the queen being on a4. It adds different kind of dynamic to the position.
And it does prevent knight to d7. We've seen that idea played in both games thus far. The queen on a4 says, yeah, you can't get there. So he's thinking right now, and is there some sort of g4? Probably not, because there's d4 for black, and that actually looks, and rook takes d4 as well. So that's not even a possibility, I guess. So what is he considering? Is he just trying to figure out which one to take?
Yeah, but see, I was going to say, what I like here for black, there's queen d4 as an idea. There's many ideas here. You can play a6 and then drop the queen back and go for b5. He does that.
I like that.
The problem is white's bishop is tied down.
Exactly. I was about to say bishop e3 is the move you want to play,
queen a3,
but the b2 pawn's hanging.
I would go queen a3 and get that bishop out.
Queen a3 is a really good move, because I think when you look at the b2 pawn, a lot of people say queen c2 towards the center, but you're walking right into a pin. Not the biggest deal in the world, but it can be annoying. So queen a3 defends the b2 pawn, although it does allow like queen c5 in black can try to trade queens.
Right, that is true. But with that, there's rook b1, which is a blunder due to rook takes c3. That's important to point out, and he does go queen a3. You need circulation among your ranks here. If you have an entire side of the board that's not moving, that's not going to bode well, given that black has most of his resources on the queen side. We see now this very interesting maneuvering battle. Who is going to prevail on the queen side? Is black going to manage to get b7, b5 in, or is white going to coordinate along the c file? And black has some holes there. Bishop b3, knight a4, knight b6 comes to mind. Either side could prevail on that flank, Robert.
Yeah, knight d7 is bringing another piece from the king side over to the center, and eventually the queen side. So the knight d7 is fine. This bishop on h5, it continues to be an issue, and white, as per usual, can play pawn to h4 and try to improve the location of the bishop coming to h3. So that's likely something we're going to see in this game, right, Daniel?
Indeed, and for black, he could consider b5, but that entails its own calculus. Knight c5, very typical placement. And again, we see this. Does white play b4? B4 knight d3, there might be rook cd1, and that knight might be trapped. So actually, I would very seriously consider b4 here.
Right, I'm just showing that if we say evaluation. The variation through to its conclusion, the knight gets trapped. So even though you took a rook for just a bishop, the knight goes down as well, and I get 2 minor pieces for my rook.
But
So,
after b4, black goes knight back to d7, and look at that c4 square. The knight could redirect itself over to b6 and then to c4. So pawns do not go backwards, as the great Marcus Aurelius, the Roman philosophers, talked about. And I guess Sevian realizes that, but we'll see.
well, for Sarana, it's pretty easy. Knight d3 gets trapped because of rook c to d1, so then you have to go knight to d7. And he is thinking at this point. So,
Okay.
so
What does
maybe
he see?
rook c d1 doesn't work somehow?
But why? Why doesn't it work?
No, I mean, look at the barge.
I am. Oh, the bar.
Yeah, it works.
Maybe it's time for that knight to go to the bar.
True.
Or Alexei's. Yeah.
I wonder what he was thinking, though, because he plays knight d3.
He just missed
He honestly must have just thought that rook d1 was impossible because the bishop's on h5.
Just overlooked it. He thought rook c2 was forced, and then black has a5, and the pawns come to the rescue of the knight. You can just see. Well, it's not over. Let's be very clear. Knight takes f2. We have to put things in perspective. Your white has 2 pieces for a rook. Now, Sevian is actually considering taking with a knight. Amazingly, that also attacks the knight, but there's no need for those kinds of gymnastics. And if I were Alexei, yeah, he gives up the knight for a pawn. I would try to put things in perspective here and say, okay, I've got a rook for 2 pieces. I've got that c4 square now for my rook. White has a very difficult technical task ahead of him.
Agreed. It's not going to be a straightforward win for white, but clearly Sevian's position is much better. But b5 is a good start. You can get rooks to c4 to double your rooks. At some point, you maybe play a5 to b4. But if you ever push this a pawn, the b5, it's not just with the pawns, but the squares on the queen side. And that's why bishop came back to
I like that.
one here. With bishop g5, let's trade bishops. And the d6 pawn becomes weaker, but looser protection of the queens and squares on white's end as well.
Yeah, and if you take on g5 and try to play a4 to sort of make inroads on the queen side, you have to watch the move a5 in general, because that knight on c3 is somewhat undefended. Only the queen is defending it, and Sevian needs to keep an eye on that knight. So just off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure what the most prudent way of sort of making inroads is. Maybe you want to take on g5 and go knight b1 and just redirect that knight over to d2 and then b3, but that does seem a little bit too slow.
Another idea I would say is, I don't want to allow you to take me on e3. That's clear to me. So if I take on g5, queen g5, and then play bishop to d3, that way I can put my knight on e. Woo!
Okay. Whoa, Tabasco sauce right there, but is that going to backfire?
That was not what I was expecting, because he's voluntarily making his king a bit weaker, but gaining some space. And he's saying, I have the 2 minor pieces. I can do this. My king is not going to be attacked by what? A lone queen?
But
not so fast.
I don't like it at all.
I don't like it at all. I mean, what if I take on f4 and
queen
bring
h4?
Queen onto h4?
I guess knight e2, but then rook c4. I mean, it's just white is not able, and I think he realizes it now. You can tell always by the pause in between moves that are somewhat forced. Right. He's thinking, oh man, I didn't evaluate this properly. Queen h4, knight e2, rook c4. The position could collapse in 2 moves.
There is queen to b1, so it's not totally collapsing, but it looks not very good. So
but even
Diamond's
there,
on queen h4,
c4.
knight e2. This is protecting the rook, and the knight's coming to defend the g3 square. Rook c4. I think queen b1 to defend the pawn and the rook. And if rook takes c4, don't I have bishop f2?
Oh yeah, you do.
So
but then queen e7.
Oh, your queen just comes back, so I don't even have bishop f2. So what's going on here? This is, I guess, take, you take, and now we have a whole new game.
Look at what he's done. He has given. I like what he's done. He's given up f4, but at least he keeps his pieces close to the chest. At least he's not going to lose any of them.
But now it's 2 pawns and a rook for the 2 minor pieces, and white has the worst king. So knight comes to d4. That's looking at the c6 square, and that's going to be a huge pain for black to deal with. But then maybe black can say, let me go rook e8 and focus in the center rather than the queen side.
That's a great idea. Just ignore the c6 square altogether. Focus on building your assets. Sarana goes bishop f4, activating the bishop, taking the e5 square under even further control. Now, the knight could go to f5, but I'm not sure it would be stable there on account of g6. I'm not sure black would want to go g6 immediately. Right. For now, biding his time is Sevian with queen b3. But now you've got to watch for bishop d2 and rook c3 ideas.
True. And I was just looking at bishop h2 check, excuse me, but king g2 keeps this bishop safe and sound.
But still an idea.
We're coming up with different ideas here, trying to infiltrate with the pieces. Bishop d2 looks good, and followed by rook c3. I like that idea. What else can you play here? This rook doesn't exactly have another square on the c file to work with, because you played rook c7, then knight c6 makes your rook on c7.
Yeah, this idea of knight c6, I think, raises the urgency, and he does go bishop d2.
So
I think
now
rook
the question
c3 is going to be unpleasant.
Well, which square do you go to? E2 or D1 with this rook?
Well, wherever you go, you need to make a decision right now.
I would go rook
Rook
D1.
e2.
Yeah, he plays it.
There's rook c. Oh, you're not threatening rook takes d2 because of queen g5.
Good call. Very good vision there. So that's not a threat. So rook c3 does still work out, and you can always throw in queen g5 check if you need it. He plays rook c3, and now wait, bishop e3 might be good because you can't take my rook because I have queen takes f2 check, and I'm just trying to remove one of your very important defenders of your king.
I really like that call. Maybe knight f5 then, trying to throw that blanket over.
Oh, it's getting.
But
really
there's a discovery possibility there if the knight moves. So if the bishop moves away from e3, rook g3 is going to be a threat. I mean, this is so hard to play for white, though, and he does go bishop e3.
So
this
bishop c5 is kind of a nasty move, right? Bishop c5 threatening rook g3 check.
And you cannot move the king anywhere. Maybe you go bishop g2 there, covering the king as best you can.
This has happened. Watch out for rook g3.
Oh, bishop g2. There might be. Oh, there's some beautiful d3.
Yeah.
Oh,
this is getting complex. So what if I just take and play rook to c8? Like, can I just do that and go after the dark scores later?
Completely agree. You could go rook c8 even immediately, but I don't see any particular reason to keep the tension.
And I guess one move for white is knight to d4 next, just to keep the bishops on. Whoa, that was played. And bishop takes c5.
But is he
knight h6, knight g4.
That? Oh.
Wait, there's some problems with the dark squares.
There are. He's just created some big weight. I would go king f8.
Then bishop g2, rook f1 maybe?
Uh-oh. Queen h6 is coming in.
Yeah.
That's not the end of the world, though, king h8, because white's own king is also very weak. This is going to be a time scramble. Buckle up.
Okay, so queen d4 check, and then f6. And then rook d2, rook f2. Okay, he goes bishop g2 to go rook f1.
He doubles.
But rook f1, there's rook c1, very importantly. Very important move, trading off the rooks.
At the last second, he takes. Now black is better again. h5.
But watch out for queen a7 check. Watch out for that check.
Stops it. Oh, good vision there. Queen g5 is possible. Queen g5 might just be winning.
But then there's take, knight f3. You have to calculate the e5 pawn break. So queen b6 plays.
Oh, rook c2.
Rook c2. Queen g1 only.
Wait, but queen a7 and knight g4.
Oh, knight g4. What a save.
The king runs.
Wait.
And where's the mate?
h5 coming?
No, but queen f6 is mate. Okay.
Okay, he had h5 at some point, but now rook c1.
Oh, that's a buzzkill.
Yeah, that's just
everything collapses. What a game.
We're like also saying the same thing today. It's worrying me.
Yeah, somehow we're on the same page. That's not good, Robert. We need to change that. We really need to change that.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, what a crazy game that was.
Absolutely. I mean, that was just, it had all of the ingredients of high level, the kind of high level chess that we've been seeing day in and day out at the JSCC.
And we have to acknowledge that Sarana blundered. He put his knight on d3, he missed rook c to d1, but he kept his composure, and that's really important because the game is not won or lost often at the first mistake. It's what happens as you get into time trouble as the game continues. So we have a 2.5 start after 5 games. Sarana has the white pieces. And speaking of sharp chess, Danya, these kind of anti-Moscows, what to take in about this?
It is, it's a crazy, together with the Botvinnik, which we saw once yesterday, this is what I would consider to be the sister or the cousin or choose your relative of the Botvinnik, where black does cling to that pawn on c4, but it doesn't take a long time to see that white's got a lot of compensation in the form of central control, in the form of the fact that black's position could collapse very, very easily here. There's a lot of piece sacrifices, kind of in the style of the King's Gambit, actually, where you just leave your knight on c3. Well, he hasn't sacked the piece because he takes on f6, but black has to handle this very precisely. Black's king, for the time being, is stranded in the center. So if there are files that open, such as the B file, the attack could come very, very fast.
And I see that the bar is going up in white's favor.
Yeah,
but this is a super complex variation.
I would take on h8 and take on a1, and then c4 is probably going to fall. And even if black castles long, because that B file, it's what I mentioned, because that B file has opened, Black's king just does not have any safe place to go to, but Alexei chooses rook b1.
Yeah, he has rook
Makes
h6, bishop g5 with tempo, keeping the
Right.
king stuck in the center, and he will regain this pawn on b2. So that's his claim. c4 will also fall. You made a mention of that. So what's the current material count? Black has all 8 pawns, even though they're scrambled across the board. White has 6 pawns. So 2 extra pawns for black, but once b2 and c4 fall, that restores material equality, and black's king is in worse shape. White's king on g1 is safe and sound for the time being. But Danya, there are sometimes these ideas where black plays a move like g3 to open up the king on g1. Something to consider is while the king looks safe for now, you have pushed your pawn to h4, and that has some drawbacks as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Wherever there is a pawn like that, white has to keep an eye on it. Now, here's a thought. After rook h6, bishop g5, could black try c3? I realize it looks completely unsustainable, but if you take that rook on h6, notice that black's bishop can then swing over to d2 and defend c3. So I don't believe in that, but I think that Sevian needs to be very concerned here because despite the 2 extra pawns, he's going to lose one of them. So I would consider c3 here almost as a desperate measure. But the problem is Sarana could go queen b3. He doesn't even have to take the rook.
Yeah, I was saying queen d3 as well, just to get this pawn back. He plays queen b3, which is better. I was looking at queen takes d4, but I forgot the bishop on b7 would be hanging. So queen d3, my idea was that, hey, I'm still attacking your pawn, and bishop b4 was never possible because the bishop is needed to defend the rook. But same idea, different execution. You are losing your pawn on c3, and then down goes b2 after that.
Right. And then you won't even have a pawn for your suffering.
I could see this ending in the next 10 moves.
That's the downside of these lines for Black, Robert, is you need to handle them so well. Sevian is a Slav player. He knows the bot. He's a specialist in the Botvinnik variation. But Alexei made a very good choice by going for the Moscow variation. I think it's a little less familiar to Sevian than the Botvinnik.
For sure. And look at the time situation, by the way. Sarana has 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and Sevian down to 2 minutes. He has less time. His position is not very good. He also lost the previous game, which could fluster him a bit. And for Sarana, he's looking to take the lead once again. He had the lead after the first game of the match. Then Sevian stormed back, and now it's Sarana. And these kind of back and forth, these seesaws will happen in such a long match.
Look at the time situation. In the 3-minute portion looking forward, it's going to be important for Sevian to stabilize the ship. I mean, almost 3-minute advantage for Sarana, and I was a little bit critical of that strategy in 2 games ago in certain positions. But that is not to say he's not very well prepared and confident, and those things are obviously very good. As we can see here, he's supremely confident in these positions, and he's playing flawless game, leaving himself with tons of time for the conversion phase.
Okay, a5 is a good move, all things considered. Put the bishop on b4. That's actually was a really smart decision by Sevian.
But what do you do now? I mean, f3 is an idea too, potentially, or f4.
That's true. F3 is an idea. I'm looking at the center and looking at d4 and e4. I'm like, that looks good, but I could see black turning around and attacking that center. And the bishop on b4 has stabilized thanks to this pawn on a5, and an eventual c5 move could be a bit annoying.
G3 is possible here, but then white could go f4 and ram that pawn through to f5.
Yeah, that doesn't look very good.
The problem, again, as we discussed, the king has no safe haven. Maybe Sevian needs to find a way to attack that d4 pawn. That seems to be the only tender spot in white's camp. But look at that bishop on g5. Not only is it a thorn in black's throat, but it's also guarding the d8 square.
And he plays c5. He had to, right? He has to go after the d4, but I would play d5. I'm not opening this position up for black's pieces, and d5 keeps things closed, and the king on f8 is in the most danger.
And if he takes d5?
Then I was going to probably take on g4, but I didn't calculate it thoroughly. I just thought that the king.
What do you mean you didn't calculate it thoroughly? That's unacceptable. I calculate every recommendation.
Of course you do. So rook takes b4, f takes g4. How do you feel about that?
Oh, you have to do that. Rook takes b4 is the kind of move that your hand just makes that move, and then your brain has to approve of it, or there will be rebellion.
Because we keep talking about the king being stuck here, and if I allow, bishop c5 now is disastrous because it's a pin and winning the queen, but I can just see black coming back if you just allow some activity. And rook to c1, that feels like you're going the wrong direction. You're keeping your extra pawn, but you're losing your attacking chances. So I would focus on the attack. Rook takes b4, pawn takes b4, pawn takes g4, opening this rook up, just trying to get after this rook on g6 as well. I don't really see how black meets that.
I could see a case being made for rook c2 here, sort of, I suppose, in the style of a computer saying, all right, I'm not actually going to give you any material, but I am obviously on board with you.
What about the pawn on a4 if you like rook c2?
Yeah, and I was going to go rook c1 there. Queen takes a4, rook c1.
But I have queen a3 in those kind of positions.
But okay, I mean, takes a queen maybe, but no, I completely agree with you.
Like, even though white's better, we know that. It just, with the queens off the board, it gives some better chances for black.
I would argue after queen a3, if we look concretely, I would go queen f4. And I know Alexei, he does it. He doubles on the c file. Okay, that I'm not sure about. But yeah,
look at the bar next to the board. It went really down. And queen a3 didn't like, though.
No.
It hated
Why?
it. Queen d4 maybe?
Ooh, no, you didn't. Queen h8 is a devastating threat. Yeah, and c6 is also a threat.
And the difference is the rook's doubled here protects c5. He goes queen f4, which is still going to be good. Bishop c5, rook takes c5 would have won tactically because of a check on d6.
c6 now and bishop a6. Do you just promote the pawn? You just say, you know what? I'm a man of simple taste. I'm going to promote that pawn.
That's so painful. Like you're trying to stop the attack, which you might not even be successful in doing, and then bishop a6 happens, and here comes c7, c8.
Oh. And that is something that we've referenced as Sevian trying to muddy the waters here with e5, as he should. But, because that rook on g6, now it's all of a sudden attacking at c6, so Sarana has to be accurate here.
He takes on e5. There's queen e8.
Queen e8, yeah.
Right.
You go after the material. You don't always go after checkmate. Sometimes you just go after the material when you're attacking, and that can be the most effective, foolproof strategy.
And here queen c3 forces the queens off the board because the rook tries to blockade on c7 at the end. There's bishop to d8. So, I mean, among other things, that should be good enough. He plays queen. Wait. Rook takes c6.
Oh, my lands.
Oh, I suggested, and of course it's bad. He misses it.
He misses rook e8. No, but now c7, bishop c7 is his idea, but there's no way that can work.
No way. I mean, even, f4 here? Just push that pawn through.
Then f6, maybe?
Yeah,
but now just FG. I mean, the pieces start falling apart for Sevian.
Because f6, bishop h5, nice.
Yeah, now bishop f4. I mean, anything.
There's bishop d7, bishop f4, nice. Yeah, this is over.
Yeah,
but
that was a great catch. That was a big chance.
And it's funny because that discovery still was in my mind. So I was like, you were saying FG and I was saying F4. I was just trying to stop the bishop checks. But he misses one chance to stay in the game there. Now he has 2.7 seconds left. There's a pass pawn on C6.
He's staying alive, but...
How is he doing this? C6
I don't understand. Rook takes A4, bishop C6, rook C4. Okay. Sarana has to be careful. I mean, that king on H3 is not entirely safe.
Well,
but no, he's just losing.
Yeah, it's a free piece.
Yeah. Okay.
And I wonder for Sam if he's looking forward to the quicker time controls or if he'd prefer to play more in the longer one because he's playing this game out.
I mean, yeah, it's so evenly matched that I think they both don't necessarily have a preference in this case. But yeah, maybe just like inertia. So 25 minutes left. It's been, neck and neck in these games.
Yeah, let's bring up that board from the last game once more, just to show that tactic that was overlooked by Sevian. He was on the defensive. He didn't have much time. But things at this point here, the queen trade, which I suggested, turns out to be not so good because rook takes c6, rook c6, bishop c6.
Black's not even worse.
The point is this is immune because bishop h2 check. And I guess, I don't know, it still looks good for white. Even after that.
But of course, black is still worse. But comparatively speaking, Robert, I mean, this would be big turn of events. And you might look at it and say, well, two bishops for a rook is better. But look at that passed pawn. That's the whole point, right?
Right. That does give you a chance. And bishops are obviously on the opposite color, the two bishops. And you can't team up on squares. So there could be a way for black to try and hold. It still would be good for white. So let's go back to the current game as, hey,
can I
wait? This is from the English, but there's a pawn on c3. So clearly There was a trade on that square.
Can I give myself a pat on the back here?
Because you said 4e3 and it happened?
Well, I said that he would keep the same openings but change the variation. That's what he did.
Yeah, and he's playing the sort of Carlsen way where you push the pawn to e4, and Sarana's actually dealing with this quite well.
He is.
Because in the way that White has played this, you've given up some light square control. You're still fighting for the center on the d4 and e5 squares, and right now this is a critical moment because I was about to say I don't think you want to take on d4, but maybe tactically there's some kind of knight b4
Knight b4. Yeah, also almost reminds me of a Raul Lopez for some reason, which I can't put my finger on.
Is it because there's a pawn on e4 and you just took on d4 and have e4 tricks? Okay.
Well, knight b4 idea exists also, and c5 undertone. Not that he's going to play it. Okay, so he does it. Again, the speed with which he goes for this line, because even after knight b4, it's not like when you take on a2, the game is over.
First?
I
don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. Like, do I go rook a2 first? Do I play knight to b4?
Or nothing. Or do you go...
Like rook e8? I don't know.
Well, he decided to move first and think later.
he played rook e8. Okay. That's E5, probably the... Though. e5, then I have knight d5? Like, you're giving me some squares? Knight g5. Oh, you're going to checkmate me?
He's so confident. I mean, to me, I would be terrified here. So even queen takes c4, bishop d5. I mean, everything has to be considered.
I like that, where you take two pieces for the queen, and then you threaten f7, you threaten c6. It probably doesn't pan out.
Taking a page out of your book, sacrificing other people's
I'm into
pieces.
It. Let's just look at it. We're analyzing. Queen c4, bc4, bishop takes d5, and I'm...
Ugh. You know who doesn't like it?
Who?
Grandmaster Barr.
Yeah, Grandmaster Barr.
Mr. Barr is not a fan of this sacrifice.
I mean, it looks good to me. Just by good, I mean it looks pretty cool. But I guess you can probably just even take on e5 or something like that.
Right.
And then bishop c6, pawn d4. I don't know. It's too much to calculate. It's starting to look good for black, though.
Yeah, it is. No, it's too little stuff. Now, knight e4 is a far more measured and prudent move. Look at those dark squares. I mean, those dark squares are going to be in Alexei's nightmares.
They certainly will. And this knight came to b4.
Queen d2 and queen h6.
You're just so focused on the checkmate. Give me a break. So what about rook takes a2 now? And I take with the knight on a2, and at least I hit your bishop on c1.
I don't care. I'm going to go queen h6 anyway. You take my rook on a1, you knock yourself out. No, but then knight g5 will sack my queen.
That's what I'm trying to do. You started it with the queen sack. I'm returning the favor. We're going to look at this line very quickly here.
Nice.
Rook takes, knight takes queen h6. So I was going to take on c1. You're going to go knight g5 to try to checkmate me on h7. I was going to throw in a check on e2 and then probably sacrifice my queen. Just so you know. But I don't even know if it works.
No, I think it does, and that's one thing, Robert. When you're going after checkmate, it can be very easy to lose track of how much you've sacrificed, and all of a sudden your opponent gives up his queen. You say, I've succeeded. I won the queen, but you've sacked like 2 rooks and 2 pieces, and all of a sudden you have no pieces left. So now Alexei has taken on e5, posing Sam with that very same decision. Does he go queen h6, or does he actually take back on e5 and open up that d file, which might be to black's favor?
Right. Queen h6, there are even ideas eventually with knight to c2, tactically could potentially pan out. Knight to d3 as well. It's tough to evaluate such a position because white could be in danger of losing several pawns, but the king on g8 is so unsafe. So he does go with queen h6.
Okay. Well,
and f6 is one idea. Don't love it, but it's a way to try to stop a piece point in g5.
I suppose f6 de, I guess, is what he wants. And then if rook e5, bishop b2. Now, if you go knight c2 here, one line would be, okay, so he's taken.
So knight g5, knight f6, I guess protects h7. And there's also queen f6, where you give the h7 pawn, but you save your king.
So rook d4 is to be considered here. What does he want against
rook? Then there's knight c2.
Rook takes d5. And bishop g5, I think.
But that's also very complicated, right?
Or bishop b2. I think rook takes d5 and bishop b2 is the key.
Okay, so like rook d4, knight c2, you're saying rook d5, bishop b2.
Yes.
Yikes.
I think this ends it.
Yeah, that's just, you're crushing me on the dark squares.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. So
that's not good. So rook d4 played.
He's got to find a move here. Maybe f5.
F5. What can I also with queen e7 to get out of this pin?
Then I maybe go bishop b2, but I understand. Then you go f5.
And I also have queen f8 as well, maybe to try to trade the queens. I'm getting desperate. I'm being honest with you. I'm getting like ultra defensive.
No, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, at first I thought it's crushing because of the dark script, but with the files being open, notice that the knight is kind of immobilized because of the threat of rook e1, at least until the bishop moves out.
Oh my gosh! And actually, after f5, there's queen e1 check. Like in some variations, you have to be very careful.
Although then it takes and go bishop out, so that's not mate, but it is very dangerous. I agree.
Right. So, what a weird position we have.
And I don't envy the players with 2 minutes, essentially on both of their clocks to calculate these insane complications.
Yeah.
And this is where I want to just say, Robert, and I think you'll side with me here. You can look at the eval bar and say, well, it's so simple, this, and this. Or you look at the computer's top choice, how can they miss it? It's very important to understand how complicated this position is. The computer makes everything seem simple, but try to understand the sort of nuance and complexity and the amount of candidate moves that need to be calculated here. Bishop 100%. B2 is what occurred to me. Bishop B2 f3 rook d5.
Ooh, because you have... But what about queen e7 after bishop b2?
But then I was going to suggest rook e1 maybe there. Okay, he's got bishop d5 with tempo. Oh, but queen d7, there's knight f6.
Right, that's a problem. Although you would sack your queen. But the rook and a8's hanging. That's something that I didn't notice at first. But queen d7, knight f6 check takes... You can even take with the bishop on f6, but rook d7, knight d7, the rook on 8 is hanging at the end, and so white has a ton of extra material.
Right. He's taken on e4, but this has the air of desperation. I mean, you could take on d8 and go back to f6 and use that pin to win. Now, granted, black will have two pieces for a queen. It's not entirely over there, but I think it essentially is.
Yeah.
And he's done precisely that.
Good eye by you there. We'll just see it again. Bishop f6, threatening checkmate in 1, threatening the rook. The knight is, well, it can capture, as it just did, but you lose the rook on 8. And Donnie, one other thing that I want to say, kind of what you were implying is, it is difficult to go through all of these immense complications for the players. And I also think when we make mistakes, I am never ashamed of my mistakes. And part of the reason why is like when I see the evaluation bar jump, I'm like, okay, clearly I didn't see something, but we're also going through that same process of there are so many different possibilities. And that queen sacks that we were talking about earlier, those look very interesting. And if we were playing, we wouldn't have an evaluation bar. So we'd just be like, hey, this looks like good compensation. And compensation isn't always concrete. It's more like this gives me a chance. And so the players, if they blunder, if they make some kind of inaccuracy, it's almost always not a one-move thing. It's usually like, oh, shoot, I missed the fourth move down that third variation that I was calculating. So
yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Robert. And one analogy I make sometimes is to basketball. Imagine if you could, every time that a shot was released, or in football that Aaron Rodgers or Jimmy Garoppolo throws an interception every second pass. But let's say every time Steph Curry shot a basketball, you would immediately know whether the shot went in as it was flying toward the basket. Would you watch a version of basketball that had that? Probably not. That would take all the fun out of it, right? And I encourage people to do the same thing. Try to look at the position with your own eyes. Try to appreciate some of the complexities. Try to see, if the shot goes in or not. That's where part of the fun lies, and people struggle to find the truth. It's not only about, the computer said this, what a big mistake, what a blunder. It's about appreciating the search for truth, the heart and the soul that these players put in to try to be as precise and as nuanced as possible in their play.
For sure. And I mean, even this position, I see the bar saying plus 3.15 over there. That's not how the players are thinking. Sarana is like, I'm losing, but I don't see how I lose the game. And Sevian's thinking, wait, oh shoot, this knight's coming to f3 to check. I have to be careful. And so he has to block his queen. But there are no weaknesses. Yeah, Black is down material, but no weaknesses. And king e6. Look at this. Everything is safe and sound here.
H4 I like.
He's playing checkers.
Okay.
Ooh, E3 not yet, but I'm looking for the right time for an E3 move.
I would go A4.
And then I would go knight E5 back to D3 or to G4, right? Give me the G4 square for my knight.
Now, with white, you would consider taking on D5. That's whoa. E3 now?
E3, so tempting.
It is A4. He's gone.
But okay, you
E3
trade
now?
off the pawn.
E3.
E3.
Take it, I
Rook takes
guess.
D5. I think you have to do it. I'm too scared of that bishop.
Wait a
Does it?
minute. 91. Oh God, this is complicated.
Oh, that's a nice move though. Queen E8 to take on
But
E3 with the queen.
This is not. I mean, it's probably still winning, but it's not easy.
It has borderline fortress.
Yeah, it is borderline fortress.
And F4 is probably a very good move because the G6 pawn is going to be.
It's hard to if Black loses that D pawn, that's still not over in that event of that. How easy is it to miss a fork here or something like that, Robert?
And actually, if you do play F4, there is the possibility that you can't make progress with your pawns because
F4,
you have
Rook D5. Rook D5.
Oh, Rook D5 was so nice there.
And I might have been winning, almost winning.
But this still might be a fortress. How do you make progress here?
Exactly. You have to bring your king, but that's so dangerous. You're playing with fire.
And you just can't push a pawn. There's no break. King H7. I think it's a fortress.
Draw. This is a draw.
Yeah. Rook F7, Rook F5. How are you going to stop me?
Right. The king just cannot penetrate sort of the fifth rank. Even if it does, you're only asking for trouble. I would be careful with white here about pre-moves and stuff like that.
Right. There could be a timely knight F5 and then the G3 pawn.
Yeah, Alexi's just saying, all right, you're not going to push me around here.
No. He's just going back and forth. And there's no way to make progress because you can't go pawn H4 to H3, which is what you need to do.
Yep, that's exactly right. It's all about the pawn breaks where you have to dislodge one of the pieces. Now, yeah, I've seen this idea of bringing the king around to, B4, but the rook extends its influence throughout the whole board. That's the strength of a rook.
Exactly. And just knight H6, knight to G4, king G7, king G8. The thing is, black doesn't need to do anything.
Yeah, there's no attempts even. There's no way to force Zugzwang. There's simply absolutely nothing. King D5, Rook F5 is an important note.
Yeah, don't bring your knight F5 almost works, right? To hit G3, Rook E7, but not quite. Keeping the rook on F5 is just sensible.
I think it makes sense that Sam is playing this out. He's definitely torturing Sarana. He is making him find these moves, but by and large, I mean, there's very little to play for here. Oh, wait a minute. Why did he allow that?
Because he's got... Oh, my gosh.
No, but now if you go Rook F7, I will take on F7.
Right. You have to be careful. Rook
There
F8?
was no need to allow that. It might still be a draw.
Wow. It's still a fortune.
Oh, 50 move. Oh.
That was all. I'm like, wait,
That's
why did they go in a
hilarious.
draw? But it's 50 moves.
It's still a draw there, Robert. Knight G4. Yeah, there is just no way to make progress.
Yeah, that was awesome. We can just bring up the previous game very quickly because even though the queen got to E7 and the king's on E6, you just go knight G4, knight H6, and the best you have is some kind of check and a king comes up. So what a way to end that game. A 50-move rule draw. And we have a sharp game once more. There's an extra pawn on C4 for black, but it takes a lot to keep it. And white is ahead in development. White is pinning this knight, and the sacrifice is typical. Knight is still pinned. Take with the pawn here. Danya, these type of lines are so tricky. And we saw this, was it yesterday? Or was it 2 days
We did
ago?
see that yesterday.
Yesterday. Right, we saw this variation. With queen b6, castle
Yeah,
queenside, c5.
So this is not actually the Botvinnik. It is the Botvinnik. It's somewhere between a Moscow and a Botvinnik. Usually in the mainline Botvinnik, bishop comes to G2.
Right. That's why I was just dragging bishop over there. So it's different. And we can highlight some of those differences in the sense that you often play c5 as black in the Botvinnik because you're trading bishops on G2 and exposing the light squares around the white king. But because you haven't played G3, your light squares are better defended here from white's perspective. And the queen dropped back to C7, the pawn goes over to A6. C5 now not so easy with the B5 pawn under attack.
H4. This is modern chess at its finest.
How could you explain this in 20 seconds to people? I would say black's king is safe for the time being, but in order to gain activity, you have to make a move like C5 at some point, and that makes the king worse, especially with bishop F3 and trading on the light squares. And for white, you right now have a board state where you are up one pawn, but the pawns are all over the place, and black has potential aiming at the D4 pawn and potentially later pushing pawns on the queen side. So the pawn A6 in the endgame could be overextended. Danya, I have no idea how to evaluate this position.
No, this is crazy. And the way I like to explain these positions sometimes is through the lens of a concept in physics, which is potential and kinetic energy.
Yeah.
You know, when you're going down the hill on a roller coaster, you've got a lot of kinetic energy. That's white. White is moving his pawns around. You know, he's making improvements to his position. He's inducing weaknesses. It may look like black's very passive, but he's got a lot of potential energy. When the position uncoils, if white is not prepared for that, there might be hell to pay. Something like knight e5, you can see how all of black's pieces, again, they look like they're pushed back against the wall, but one or two files open and white's position can collapse like a house of cards.
Totally true. And right now you have to consider b4, you have to consider knight e5, so the position is quite complex. And that's why Sevian is in the think tank. b4, always an option, right? That is just a move you consider, but then you look at the c4 pawn. Wait, did I just weaken my pawn unnecessarily? What are the tactics in this position? It's really difficult to figure it out because the individual moves, both players are seeing them, but it's not about the next move. It's about 4 moves down the line. Like if you play b4, does that allow the c4 pawn to drop, or do I have after knight queen takes a6, pinning this knight, protecting c4, but then c4 pawn is pinned, right? Like you just think about this going forward. Do I have b3 here? Everything is getting crazy.
Yeah, there's more traffic than rush hour in San Francisco here. I mean, there's just everything is going on.
And this is actually happening.
Queen d6. He shies away from that pawn on a6.
Didn't want to open up the rook, is what I gather.
Yeah. Clearly, this is equal 0-0-0. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, of course, Mr. Barr. What does white even do? How do you even think about what to do here? Because if you go DE, which he does, you open up that A8 bishop, but you could not allow black to form that pawn phalanx.
Right, but G2 is hanging because you haven't castled.
But the castle long, maybe.
Ooh, then C3 for black, potentially? You have to...
BC. But I was going to pin that knight. That was the idea.
No, I'm with you there. I think that it's certainly valid and actually might just be a good move. But there are some counter shots very quickly for black as well. So it's not so straightforward. And castling queenside, as mentioned, you know, there's C3 as a potential move. There's bishop takes G2. Your knight on A4 isn't exactly the happiest piece, so maybe bishop C6 to defend the knight and trap the opposing knight. All these are possibilities here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems after castles that the evaluation general, Grandmaster Bill Barr, has filed a lawsuit against the move castles long. I was going to bring that in, did that in an awkward way. Queen e3 instead. Okay, so queen trade. I mean, an endgame is just as complicated as the middle game here.
Right, and you know, there's these asymmetrical pawn structure where white has more pawns on the king side, black has these pawns on the queen side. Are they strengths? Are they weaknesses? The pawn c4 could fall very quickly. So what moves would I consider for black at this point? I guess bishop d5 comes to mind. Maybe bishop takes g2 as well. Do I trade on e3 or allow the capture on e6? I don't think I allow a capture on e6.
No, that pawn on f6 becomes so strong.
Right. And it can go to f7 if you end up trading on e6.
You sleep on it. Yeah, I mean, this is just... you rely so heavily on your intuition here if you're a human. I mean, this is... If I had to envision how Magnus Carlsen, let's say, trains with his coach, this is what I imagine. Like, he solves positions like these. You know, he gets 2 hours to think about the best move for white. And actually training in these types of chaotic positions is one of the sort of Russian training methods. I think Mark Dvoretsky advocated for that. It really builds your intuition. I mean, calculation-wise, it's impossible to be precise, but what you learn are these sort of cues that you can use to sort of make heads or tails of these very chaotic positions. But I'm completely failing in that regard right now. Still don't know what's going on.
Yeah, this is a wild position, and Sevian down on the clock, down on the scoreboard. He really wants to get this game. But after knight takes c5, it does look like that black king is in more danger than white's king, even though white's king is uncastled. That could be a good thing, because you don't know where the checkmate's coming from. Not really the clearest of attacks coming your way. And knight b7 is weirdly a move that I'm considering. Shutting down your bishop on a8, and also opening my queen to your a7 pawn.
Yeah.
Just feels like black's king is going to be in some trouble. And
he does precisely that. Now, queen takes g2. Is that a move?
It certainly is. It's worth considering. And after queen g2, there could be some kind of queen h3 check. If you need to trade the queens, I don't want to trade queens necessarily, but if I need to, and I can also just play rook to f1, slide my rook to safety. Your knight's under attack, a7's under attack. A lot to calculate.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think we share the feeling here that white seems to be slowly but surely getting the upper hand here, initiative-wise. Now, rook f1, I was thinking about b3, but then if you take on d8, the king has, well, maybe b3, because if knight takes d8, then bishop b4 check.
Aha, you're trying to just go for a quick checkmate. But after b3, there may be some rook a4 move, which not only stops bishop b4, but attacks your c4 pawn. It is getting just so intense right now. He plays rook f1, and b3, certainly a possibility here. And there it goes, the ambulance. I don't know if you can hear the sirens, but I don't know if they're coming for white's king or for black's king.
Exactly. Man, Robert, we're on the same page way too much today.
I'm worried about me, not about you in this situation.
I'm worried about you, not about me. So now b3, rook a4. What if you throw in a bishop b4 check and you go rook e8? No, that definitely doesn't work. A knight d3 check.
I mean, it could work.
I love sacrificing other people's pieces.
You learn well because I've been doing it for years. And that is something that you want to accomplish, bringing your rook to e8. And b3 does help with a very concrete threat of bishop b4, not just check, but checkmate. And just to show that on the board quickly, after b3, like queen e5, here comes bishop b4. The king is stuck in the center, and you're just in big trouble.
Another one of those ideas, there are instances where rook takes h4 has to be considered. Rook e8 played. He does set up that discovery. Queen takes a7 is the most tempting move. What does he have planned against that? Oh, my lands. There's an idea.
There are many different ideas there. We're trying to you're trying to sack your queen on f1 at some point.
And then a perpetual with knight d4, knight f3.
Yep.
So, yeah, beautiful.
We got to show
Wait, no, but queen on a7 guards d4.
Oh my gosh, we both are going for the same mechanism. It doesn't work. We'll show in the analysis board.
Yeah, we will.
Here is knight f3 check, king d1, queen f1. We're looking at rook e1 and knight d4 back to f3 because the king has to go back and forth from d2 to c2, but we forgot the queen could backtrack and take on d4 because otherwise this would just be a repetition, but the queen takes the knight and then white wins.
He's running out of time, and he goes b3. He simply ignores the threat on the a bishop, preparing bishop b4. But what if Sarana just mops up a8 and then e8? Bishop b4 wins white's queen. Look at that rook on h8. It mobilizes exactly at the right moments.
Yeah, this is pretty
crazy. Castles. Can white just castle?
Oh my gosh, castling queenside here?
That just might be a crusher, and
he does it. He does it. I forgot the king could move because it's been there so long.
But I remember now. I would not take the bishop. I would just go something like f3.
Oh, to get the queen away from the defense of the king over here.
I would. This is where you find some sort of a crush. You do not just take the bishop. I guess you can.
Can you play also like rook f to e1, threatening some kind of bishop g4 check with?
Amazing.
I don't think it really works out, but I'm just looking at all the tactical possibilities in a position like this.
Yeah.
I mean, f4 is also possible, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
This bishop remains under attack.
He does take. Okay. Oh, okay. So he turns. I mean, this makes sense. Yeah, bishop c4, rook c8 though has to be reckoned with.
Sure, there's rook d4, I guess, that helps out here.
Mm.
And what's white up? One pawn for the time being, but f7 and b3 probably are just falling.
This is winning. King b1.
Yeah, king b1. There's bishop d5 check if the knight came back to f5.
Oh, that's exactly what
bishop
d5
d5
do. Oh, he misses it.
He missed the check.
Rook d2 though. Knight e3. But then takes and oh, careful! Anastasia's mate.
Rook oh my god, knight d2, rook a8 would be mate. You're right.
Oh my goodness, never ends.
Covers the d2 square. We saw Anastasia's mate possibility yesterday in that match. Knight f1 back. Okay, I thought you'd go for the trick.
Sarana's, he's not showing. Okay, well, I guess this is completely winning.
Yeah, take on f7 and bishop e6. Okay, not finding the bishop.
He's the bishop forks. Something about them he doesn't like.
Yeah, I guess it's just hard to recognize in certain positions.
Yeah,
f7.
Bishop d8.
Brooks. Oh, bishop d8. So
he misses it again.
Take on d4 and then b4.
Oh, yeah, nice.
b4, you pin the rook.
Boom. Goes the dynamite.
And
black remains only with a king and a bishop. What a game, Robert. What a game.
Oh my gosh. And
they're out of time.
Oh my. I wasn't even looking at the match clock.
And neither were they.
Well, we do have the 5-minute portion in the books. It is a 5-3 lead for Alexei Sarana. And Danya, does that surprise you at all? Because Sevian, according to Smarter Chess Predictions, was the slight favorite in the 5-minute portion, but Sarana, he looked sharp under the duress of time trouble.
He did, and I think what Alexei was able to do is find that medium. He was a little bit sloppy at the start of the match, but so practically strong. He found ways to complicate the situation in Sevian's time trouble. And then, Robert, toward the end of the match, I think he started apportioning his time very, very well, all led up to that final game. Absolutely incredible complications, which both of them handled so expertly. But Sarana, with moves like Queen takes A7, castles long, the ability to find these tactical blows quickly, he jumps out to a 2-point lead. So ball squarely in Samuel Sevian's court, but everything left to be decided here. The fight is still ahead.
Absolutely, and we may need a year to figure out what was going on in the game, and we also need some time to recover because our brains were just all over the place. We are going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll be back for the 3-minute plus 1-second increment portion of this Junior Speed Chess Championship match between Sam Sevian and Alexei Sarana. You will not want to miss the action, brought to you by Chess.com and Chess.com. We'll be back shortly. And we are back ready for the 3-minute plus 1 second increment time control of this matchup between Samuel Sevian and Alexei Sarana. Danya, we had an excellent start to this match, a 5-3 lead at the moment for Sarana. If you were coaching Sevian, what would you tell him? How can he mount a comeback in this match?
That was indeed an incredible 5-minute segment. And as I often say, it's important to put things in perspective and to realize for Sevian that the games were close. It was better, much better, for example, in the first game. I don't think he needs to make any global opening changes. I do think that Moscow variation he's entering with black, maybe he did a little bit of work there. Perhaps he will go for the standard Botvinnik variation. So that's one thing I think he needs to think about. In terms of the time management, in some of the critical moments, Robert, I think maybe he hesitated a little bit too much in terms of calling some of Alexei's bluffs. So that's basically what I would tell him. Maybe a little bit more confident in terms of the critical moments, but by and large, it was close, and the 3-minute segment can go either way. It was so well played by both of them. And again, we see the opening that they started the 5-minute segment with, this English with knight d4.
Yeah, I'm a little tired of this opening, if I'm
Me
being
too.
honest. Wish we could get something new, but we do have a difference because that knight was coming to a4 with the queen still on d1 and some of the other lines. Now the rook is on d1, and that should be helpful for white, but look at Sarana. He's closing the center, putting his pawns in a chain here. The problem is you can't develop this bishop without dropping the b7 pawn.
Yeah, so CD and bishop f4 is a very standard way to develop, and you stop the rook from coming to b8. So trouble could land very quickly after rook c1 and knight b5 there. Yeah, he goes bishop f4 immediately, so Sarana has to solve this problem ASAP.
And this pawn e4, it looks good. It's blunting the bishop on g2, but it also is a pawn that requires defense by another pawn. So d takes c4, it will help black to some extent, but it may just cause too many difficulties on the e4 square. For instance, dc, queen c4, e4 is under attack. And if you play bishop f5, I may even be able to play d5, just blasting through the center and putting another attacker on the e4 pawn.
Right. And this is definitely a critical moment, and Sarana trying to find a way to untangle his pieces. The move b6 comes to mind, but it doesn't resolve the weaknesses on the queen side. I mean, white could take on d5 and go knight b5. He goes for queen b6. Interesting.
And now there's always that question, do I take or do I leave it? Because queen takes b6 will double and isolate those pawns over here once you take on d5, but you see some trades happen, and maybe it's not the most that white can get from the situation. So whether I allow the doubling of my own pawns remains to be seen by taking on d5 right away, because cd, you don't have time to take back on d5, because cd5, knight d5, if you take on b3, thank you for the intermezzo. That's a check to your king, and then I take back the queen and I win a piece. So if I take on d5, black has to throw in queen takes b3, in which case white gets this semi-open file. Whether that's enough for an advantage, that's another story.
Yeah, and the move c5, I think you should refrain from, because the queen would have just dropped back and the pressure on d5 would have been lifted. He does go for this, knight b5. I mean, it certainly seems unpleasant for black. I would not want to be in Sarana's position. I think accuracy is required. Knight c7.
You can make a draw if you want. Knight b5, knight c7 is, or was, I should say at this point, a draw.
Good call.
And it still is. So if you want to make a draw, just go back and forth. But white is better
Rook
here.
C1.
There's no reason to do this. Rook d to c1, I think is what you just said. It looks good for white because the knight isn't getting trapped. It's well defended here, and it can still retreat to b5 at any moment with this back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, you could always repeat once. But bishop g4, yeah, I thought about this. And now you could choose between, you could go f3 to try to cut into that pawn wedge. But that's not necessary. I mean, you could also go e3, and it's not like the knight on c7 is going to get trapped. In fact, it's white's greatest asset. So he goes king f1.
I like that move. I think the non-committal approach, if you put e3, there could be some problems in the light square later in the game. And there's some h3 ideas here. Yeah, I need to be careful about this bishop on g4. I'm just going to push that back.
He does
that.
it.
And g4. Okay, I like that.
Now rook a5 comes to mind also.
Oh.
But then bishop b4 maybe.
Or bishop d8. You have to be a little careful there.
This is an important moment. And, okay, again, white probably can go knight b5 and evacuate his knight.
Right.
But he goes f3.
He's claiming he can do that at any time because the rook on a7 can't move and it can't be defended. So knight to b5
not anymore.
will be a possibility. Oh,
Can't
good call.
play knight b5 anymore because bishop
D3 is
d3.
checked. Nice.
But I'm sure he sees that. He's weighed the calculus of it, and that's what Sarana uses king f2 now, reinforces the threat of knight b5, knight takes a6.
Exactly. It wasn't available before because of the check. And there's also bishop f1, improving the bishop from its current space, where it's not doing much of anything, then rerouting that to f1 to put pressure on the pawn, but also the light squares. Because if black plays a5, thank you so much for the b5 square.
Right, and if you try to go bishop d3, that bishop is not going to remain there. Now bishop rook c6, this looks like complete and total domination on the queen side.
Yeah, too many areas to draw.
Yeah, I mean, knight b5 now is just open for business, and wow, bishop, he's lighting up that queen side. Look at this.
Oof. I mean, I just can't even keep a pleasant-looking face. I'm just like, ugh, I feel like I'm getting squeezed, even though I'm just watching this game.
Yeah, these kinds of binds. Now, one has to be clear. It's not like he's going after a particular pawn. I think he's just going after black's pieces at some point. Rook c8, rook c6, knight d6. So this is almost impossible to play. I would move the king away if I were black and sort of just try to survive as long as possible. See if perhaps Sevian places a piece on a sloppy square, allows some sort of a tactic. So I wouldn't say it's over, but if he plays this accurately, white should be winning.
Yeah, just really difficult for black to come up with moves. You said king h7, a possibility. He was bishop a6 to attack this rook.
Rook b8.
Instead, rook b8 goes after the b6
pawn,
pawn, keeps the pin alive. There's also knight takes f7 ideas. Let's say rook b8. Oh, because rook c6. No, rook b8, king h7. There may have been knight takes f7 because I'm distracting your rook from the bishop on d8. So
good catch.
He goes rook c6 instead, saying you can't attack my rook. My knight covers b7. It covers b5. I'll take your bishop no matter where it goes. Oh, man, just gaining more space.
Bishop d. I would go back to d3 now, though. You got to be a little bit careful about that e4 square. That's what he does.
Wait, can I just take on... No. Bishop f6 for like king e3 and taking on d5?
You could go king e3 immediately.
King e3 right away.
Yeah.
Just, why would I take on f6 when I can just do this?
Right, yeah. I mean, bishop e4, perhaps black should try to liquidate, but you're going to not only lose a pawn, but the pressure is going to remain. So it's not like you lose a pawn. It's like you lose a pawn and it's still very bad.
Right. And look at this rook d6 move. Trading off a pair of rooks. I think it's a great choice.
Yeah, I was a little bit skeptical because of bishop f6, but now I look at it and bishop e5 and that pawn is passed and it's over.
Yeah, rook c2, just the safe and sound method. And d5 is coming. King c6,
king c6,
d5, d6, etc.
Yeah, I mean, there's some precision required, but like I said at the start of the match, Robert, I'm thoroughly impressed with the technique by and large. Not, of course, the resilience and the resourcefulness goes without saying, but the technique also is reminiscent of someone very, very experienced. And here we see just d6. The red carpet has been unrolled. Now you intercept the bishop on h4. No f5. Very precise.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that f5 move a little while ago. He plays it. And he only has to watch out for his b2 pawn. That's the one thing that Sevian has to look out for. But here he gets d7. And once the trade happens, here comes d8 against queen. Resignation.
That was a fantastic positional effort by Sam.
Oh, did you see Sam? You see him just like nodding his head? He's getting himself into that. He's pumped right now. Wow. And
but now
Sarana
the pieces
has not moved. I feel like Sarana is just hanging. He's like, oh, we'll get this opening once again. I lost one game in this line, but it's tactical.
Oh, I know vigorous. That is a head workout right there. Those are some vigorous nods by Grandmaster Sevian.
For sure. And, well, speaking of vigorous, look at this line that we see once again. Super duper sharp. The bishop on f4 is hanging. And this time, Sevian throws in bishop takes c3 before doing anything with his bishop on f4. So the bishop for white stays alive, and the bishop for black has captured on c3.
Right. What I always wonder, Robert, is do they look up these lines in the break? I think probably there's different approaches. Some players feverishly go onto their chess space, look at files. Some just, down an espresso and close their eyes for a couple of minutes. Something tells me that these players are doing more of the former because this is a very theoretical heavy match. I wonder whether they in fact did that. What do you think, Robert?
I think they did. They just probably looked up one or two lines because you can't do everything in a 7-minute break or however long they have. So you just quickly just look at lines. I haven't enjoyed the position I've been getting from the black side of this opening. Let me go check just a couple lines. And I mean, here, there's no real mating attack that I'm seeing. And the queens have just come off the board. G5 is falling, and that's probably bothering Sevian. But it is even material, opposite colored bishops. The one thing, Danya, I'm sure you're going to highlight this as well. This bishop coming to f6 at some point could be a big nuisance.
I think that this bishop coming to f6 could be a really big nuisance. Robert, stop copying what I'm saying. You keep repeating everything I'm saying. It's ridiculous.
You know, it's telepathy at this point.
Yeah, and I think that, again, this is the one thing that surprises me somewhat is the speed with which Sarana goes into these lines in the e4 Nimzo, but he's not getting that much. I mean, at best, maybe his position is symbolically for choice, but even that I doubt, because there might be a bunch of exchanges down the e file and just a draw.
And we see the knight trade being offered, and Sevian goes, I respectfully decline. Let me put my knight on a4 to get after your c3 pawn. And it's just an important little mini lesson here. If you take here, he's probably concerned that this bishop coming to f6, the d5 pawn being the target. And even though there's no immediate checkmating net that black has to worry about, it just feels like you have a slightly worse position. And that's probably why he went for the activity rather than just swapping knights, and the bishop on d7 will not have the same strength that a bishop on d4 does.
Yeah, and the move rook c1, if you have to make a move like that, that means things are not necessarily going particularly well. I mean, I don't think it's disastrous, but the more I look at this position, Robert, initially I thought, yeah, that bishop is really good on d4, mating threats. But if Sevian is careful, that weakness of the pawn on c3, that's more of a static weakness. And that's something that's going to saddle white for essentially the rest of the game, unless he finds a way to somehow train it off.
No, I'm with you. And what next? The bishop on d4 looks good, but you can't just claim I have a good bishop. Now my position's all great. In fact, black, as you're saying, has a quick threat and takes the pawn on c3 directly, and bishop a4. So 92 check.
7 bishop b3.
Yep, watch out for 92 at the end of that variation where you take on b3 and 92. So the rook needs to stay protecting the square. The king came out to f2.
Knight a2.
Knight a2, another free pawn?
I guess he wants knight d2, and what he's banking on is this mate again, the possibility of mate threats. Now the bishop covers the square in e8, but okay, so let's see what happens.
Knight b5, bishop f6. I don't like this for black anymore.
Yeah, I don't like the move bishop takes b3 at all, because now the bishop dominates the knight. Now black is paralyzed. He's tied down to the 8th rank, Robert.
And that's the best. Don't play d4 because rook e4, rook h4. There could be a mate this way.
Was that just winning?
It looked pretty strong to me.
That was a great catch. Sevian is still nodding. I would not be nodding here if I were black.
I think he's trying to pump himself up rather than actually thinking that he's doing well.
Yeah, but he's got 30 seconds and he's worse, and things have gone wrong.
Why does Sarana have 2 minutes and 7 seconds? What's this guy doing?
I don't understand. It's crazy. This guy's a madman.
So he goes rook to d5, hitting the knight.
Don't go rook c5.
No, rook c5 would allow the back rank mates. He's bringing the knight to e6, it seems like.
Cold-blooded defense now by Sam. I do like what he's doing quite a bit. Rook c2 is possible now, and rook g2 even ideas.
Oh, look at that. Stopping f4, rook h3, or h4, h5, trying to get the outside pass pawn.
This is fantastic defense by Sevian, getting the knight to e6, but h4 now being prepared by Sarana. This is still complicated. It might end in a draw.
Right, but it's not so easy to play with 20 seconds left to your opponent's minute 55. So
I would start pushing the pawns on the queen side. I mean, both f4. F4 is very dangerous now.
Because you can't take. There's rook d8 checkmate. Do not blow that. Rook d7. And then rook c3. Or rook e3. Good. No, this is good for
attack begins.
It does. f5 comes. Then where's the knight going to? c5 and then bishop g5. Watch out for bishop g5, bishop h6.
Knight g2. Careful.
Yeah. Watch out that way.
King G5. I would go rook c3.
Wait, king g5, rook h3, and then rook h8's mate. Or rook c3 also.
Is there no defense?
No defense.
Wow. Simply nothing that they could do. Look at that bishop dominating everything.
Too good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a sad move to play.
Yeah, Sag and rook c7.
Yep. Okay. Doesn't win the a7 pawn, which he could have done by force.
Don't go king g6? Okay.
Rook e3 check, king f7, then rook c3, and get this rook in the c file.
Yeah, the knight is just not capable of guarding everything.
And he's going to go a5 once the rook comes to 8, so he's not losing his pawn for now. Excuse me.
Wait a minute. Rook c4 would be a nice move here.
Oh my gosh. If he plays rook c4, that's...
Even now, rook c4. I mean, there's nothing to calculate. The pawn race isn't even close.
Right.
I would do it. I mean, he's got a minute and 20 seconds.
Yeah, but you're a ridiculous human being. So rook c4.
He's going to play it. I know, Alex.
Wait, but knight takes an
never
a5?
mind.
You got, yeah, and g5. It's just very direct.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, only a psychopath like me would play rook c4.
I wasn't going that far. I was just saying that it was an unnecessary tactical sequence that still was very good.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
So check, f6, game over.
I agree that it was unnecessary, but begrudgingly. And a win there for Sarana. That is definitely a setback for Sam, who I felt like, Robert, and correct me if I'm wrong, was confident. He got out of the opening with a good endgame, and just things misfired a little bit there. Again, the time management, Sarana's getting away with playing very fast. And here we have an old school rook g1. That was a line put into practice by Vasily Ivanchuk, I think, in the 90s.
And we have a Sicilian, so we have an e4. So it is Sevian who decides to change his first move. And that last game, we had highlighted the bishop on the dark squares. That's what it all came down to. And that is why Sarana won that game. So for Sevian, he was fine. He was doing well. But the long-term pressure got to him, and it was Sarana who took that game.
Yeah.
This one, the rook g1, pawn g4. Where's your attack coming from exactly? You push the pawn. That's all good and fun.
Another
but
bishop.
What next?
Another bishop on f3. We saw one on f6. Now there's one on f3.
I think like e4, right? Just to keep that bishop.
This line is both positional and tactical. Yeah, I was going to say we often see endgames, and what white is going for here is the sort of, how do I even phrase it? There's a bunch of these semi-weak squares that black has on b6. White's got the initiative, but if black can resolve the immediate problems, obviously white has taken certain liberties on the king side and created weaknesses of his own.
Wow. The point here is like bishop b6, bishop h3. So if I go bishop here, you go rook d7, I have bishop h3 attacking your rook.
Nice.
So he drops his bishop to e6. You can just trade on d8. The knight can't take back because the e5 pawn falls. The bishop can't take back because the knight d6 check, knight takes b7. So the king had to take. And I would even consider f4 here for white. Bishop g2 can't be played because the knight's hanging. Just the move you'd like.
I mean, it can be played, which is one of the knight, I think.
Yeah, true. It is possible to do that. Just don't recommend it.
Yeah, just want to make the very, very quick, accurate. Okay, so f4 played. Wow. Following the advice of one grandmaster.
We all make mistakes every now and then, but the point is just to open the position up. The king is in the center for black. Not the end of the world without queens on the board, but now e5 is under threat. If you take me on f4, I take with the bishop. My bishop on f4 looks very strong there.
Yeah, you could still get checkmated. Rook d3, king c8, knight b6 there. I mean, it's yes, and that happens. Obviously, rook d3 will be met with king e8. Okay, so he covers the b6 square entirely, which I like. Yeah, it's hard to say who's better here. I mean, it's even hard to say who has the initiative, really.
I like white's position because I also think that the queenside pawns will be easier to push at some point, and knight d6 is going not just for the long term, but immediately this b7 pawn. If they take me on d6, I'll take back and give me the bishop pair.
Right. I mean, it's also the one thing is that white has advanced his kingside pawns very far, which does make it easy for black to create a pass pawn. Right. He can just play f5. But obviously that is not significant with so many pieces on the board. It's just like in the event of a total liquidation upon endgame, it's hard to say who that would favor. It might be black. So I think Sevian, maybe c4, c5, he's got to keep an eye on the possibility of liquidation and evaluate it carefully.
And for Sarana, he's looking at g6 to h6 at some point as well, trying to open up the king side. His rook on h8 isn't doing so much. And I would look to play h6. But for now, h6, there's just g takes h6, and there's a problem down that side.
Right. So rook d8 by Alexei, chasing that bishop away. And I guess after bishop a3, yeah, I do like white. I mean, I like the two bishops, especially in an open board like this. Things are, Sarana has to play actively here in order to compensate for that. And we'll just quickly show also the current odds. We all like the bobbing heads here. And it's been sort of zigzagging sine wave kind of thing back and forth, which reflects, how close this match is.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it's brought to us by Chess.com.
Indeed.
So if you feel stuck at your rating, you can use the innovative 12-week, it's data-driven premium study plan, and that can help benefit your chess. There is a 25% off using the code JSCC. There's a command for it, so get involved, enjoy it. It's a great product, and brought to us by Chess Goals. Awesome to have.
Absolutely.
And by the way, Sarana at the 62% odds right now. It's going well for him thus far. But this game, is it going well for him, or after Bishop G4, if you take him, I take with the H pawn and then going Rook H3 and trying to get your H7 pawn?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about knight b4. Because if you put a rook on, well, I guess you could play rook c3 check, and then you could shift your king to the b file. You just don't want to go a3 and blunder knight a2 check.
Right.
Oh, yeah, so that happens.
So your point is, if Rook C3, there is Knight A2, but not yet because it's check, and so you don't have to move your king away.
Right. And,
Can he play? Can I play A3? Because you can't take with your knight. There's Rook C3. He plays it.
Does good
Rook C3
dash.
check.
And if Rook takes, then the knight is pinned to the Rook. The knight is attacked. So, ooh. Now maybe Knight D5 should be played by Sarana.
Right, but it's clear that he wasn't moving his knight here to go Knight to D5 because he's thinking right now.
Yeah, he acquiesces, but Rook D3 maybe.
So you're giving
This
the
could go
bishop.
either way.
The bishop on F6 was under attack, so he
Oh yeah, that's right. I missed that.
drops it first. And now Bishop E6,
I was
FE6.
testing.
Does that give black a passed pawn or an isolated pawn? The answer is both, but how do you assess this transition?
Yeah, which one is it? That depends on how the game goes. What is going to be its defining characteristic? C4 makes some sense here, but you want to be careful about pushing pawns here, as we talked about. You create weaknesses. That knight is very jumpy. It can sort of chisel its way inside white's position. King b2 instead. I'm beginning to like black's position here.
Yeah, I am as well. And E5 was played. If C4, there are knight F4 ideas where my knight's actually threatening to go to H5, winning your piece. And there's the D3 square that I'm looking at. You have to be very careful here if you are Sevian. And actually, if the Rook E3, I just take on G5. E5 is immune to capture because it forks on the D3 square.
Right.
And here comes the king. Oh, gosh.
Cementing everything. Yeah, King E6. This is not looking good because white has not gotten off the ground on the queen side. That pawn is passed right now. It's not isolated.
I'm with you. And G5 is falling. Knight D4 check. Followed by Rook takes G5.
I guess Bishop E5 there, but that's winning. Oh!
Oh,
What a move.
what a tactic.
But wait a minute. I wouldn't be so sure.
I don't have a minute to wait. I see 15 seconds left and less for the players.
That's right. Wait 10 seconds here.
So B5, he's trying to calculate, do I allow the capture? Do I take
Right.
here? But if I take, there's king takes and the king comes up.
Now
Here's
Bishop
Bishop
C3
C3
at
at the
the
end,
moment.
right?
But Knight E5.
Oh,
You gotta be
95 would have
careful.
cut the bishop off.
But then King B4, I suppose.
But now 95, there's C5 check, so that doesn't work anymore.
But
Okay,
King D5 is going to be a time scribble. He's going to move. King B7.
here comes C6, C7.
They're
Push
going
that
to move
thing.
simultaneously.
And then
He's
where does
gotta
the
move.
where does the black king go at the end of this? Oh, Bishop C3, of
Black
course.
is losing.
Oh my gosh, losing on
Unbelievable.
time and
Oh,
position.
my lands.
And Sevian, he is just. Did you see that? He breathed
did.
a sigh of relief.
And
He
a
grabs a swig of his water. He's ready for the next
I-
game. We have another Queen C2 Nimzo.
Wow. And Sarana, I mean, he is a level-headed guy, but we could just tell he was rattled. That was an incredible turn of events. And when you get into those minor piece endgames, and I just want to say one thing. And I have to give credit here to my good friend, Peter Giannatos, FIDE master of the Charlotte Chess Center. He noticed this. When a player during a match takes a drink of water, it usually means that they're comfortable with their position. Okay, you never take whatever drink you have next to you. You never take a drink of that if your position is bad. It's only when your position is good. And here we see Sevian digging into that water. That was an incredible game.
Well, his position was good because the game was over, but until that moment, he wasn't taking any drinks. And he can breathe a quick sigh of relief, but the action continues. We have Sarana on the white side of this position. We did see him eventually win this game from this position where the queens were traded, though, on the G6 square. So this time, the queen is on D2. No queen trades going right after the G5 pawn. And I actually do not like the opening choice from Sevian. We've seen this time and time again. It doesn't feel like he's getting the types of positions that he is super at home in. And especially with the queens remaining on the board, Danya, it feels like Black's king is in far worse shape than White's king is, at least for
Yeah,
the time being.
without a doubt. So I feel like my assessment of this line is sort of swinging back and forth. I can't tell if if I approve of this choice for White. I feel like one game it goes that way, one game it goes this way. It's hard to say.
Ooh, so C5 knight. Whoa, bishop. How would he see that so quickly?
That's
How
crazy. That's a counter-attacking move.
Sevian saw that instantly.
Rook
I'm like,
D1,
wait.
Rook C8. That's hilarious.
Oh my gosh, right? Like we have Rook D1, Rook C8, and both bishops are in trouble here. We're just going to take a step back, bring up the analysis board so we can show you some of these lines here. And the problem for Black is that if you move the rook to attack the bishop, I take your bishop and attack your queen in the process. So you have to find this move bishop D3, and he trades on F8. So we are getting into a position with a series of exchanges, and White is even in material, but has an extra pawn in front of the king. So Danya, when you look at this, is H4 a huge threat for White? Because if we just go back a second,
that's beautiful.
Let's say H4,
nice.
Queen H4, Rook H1 would have trapped this queen over here.
Right, and that's why he goes Queen F6, unpinning himself. I'm inclined to say probably the position is about equal. So White has the weak pawn structure on the queen side. Black has a very weak pawn on G5, and you do not want to give that pawn up because that would also fork the king and the rook. I think that it's going to fizzle out into a draw shortly.
Well, one thing I'm considering is if we do trade queens and I play the C4 move, right? Because there's a pin on your rook. Like if I'm thinking long term in the king and pawn endgames, do I have the potential to spring free an outside pawn for White? But then I also have this side of the board with a passed pawn for Black. So we have extra pawns in opposite flanks, and who does that favor? I like White's position right now because of the pawns in front of the king, and the rook on D4 pinning this pawn could apply more pressure along the D file.
Yeah, you could consider Rook D6 to have Rook E6 in store against C4. I think that I do agree. I think White's got the blockade. He's got the slightly safer king, and Rook D6 it follows. But Sevian is very good at defending these types of positions and not giving a lot of chances. So, Alexei trying what he can against C4 is not currently a threat because of D takes C4.
Right. That's a very important point. C4, DC4 hits the queen, and actually Black just wins in the spot, so don't go about and do that. And he plays A4. So just trying to put his pawn on a square protected by the rook. It also stops any B5 ideas for Black if you're trying to stop C4. And it's not so easy for either player to make moves because, if you make a move like King F6, for instance, is there a Queen H7? No, there's not, but you just have to keep an eye on it.
And the same goes for White. I mean, if you abandon your king, Queen E2 could follow. So I think neither side is going to be willing to take. Now, Queen E8 is an interesting move. If you take on D5, Black is going to trade and then make perpetual check with Queen E2.
Exactly. So everything comes off, check, back and forth. Or if your king goes to H3, I have check on F1.
You could go H4, though, and then after G8, you could consider Rook T5. But I don't like it because A4 is also hanging at the end of that.
Exactly. And I think that we can tunnel on that pawn or we can forget about it, but at some point it's going to be relevant. And H4 is an interesting idea to follow up with king to H3 and try to get the pawn back. But with the queen on E8 so strong, eventually coming to E1, you probably don't have it in you to play H4.
Right.
So queen E3, I guess rook D3, something like that, but then queen F4. So I'm not sure what... Oh, but then rook takes D5. That's a funny little sequence.
That is funny. Rook E6. Now, that is a pretty... that continuation signals to me that Sevian is thinking about taking over the initiative here.
Right. His rook was sitting passively defending. Now it's on an open file in front of the queen, trying to infiltrate. So what do you do here, Donna?
King F2.
Okay, King F2 just to keep everything closed, but can I swing to the H file?
You can, but then I'll go back to G2.
Oh.
Okay, so he takes... Uh-oh, buckle up.
Queen D4 check.
Oh, who's winning here?
Okay, this is getting tricky because
F6.
Queen E2, there's also Rook H1 check.
There is F6, Rook takes G5.
So
okay, so I guess White has to bail out.
Well, what about Rook E5 here? Do you want to shut your queen down?
Ooh.
Okay, Queen D3 played, and King H6.
Whew.
Rook
Okay.
d6 check. The king has to go back to g7.
Or rook d6 f6.
Oh, you sneaky, sneaky guy.
Son of a gun. Okay, so rook d6 f6 takes. King g7. Is he gonna do it? No, he's not.
Well, I think I can just move my rook back
King
to
g8
d6.
there too.
I just move my rook away, so I don't think it works out. But we don't have much time. Okay, we have the pieces going back and forth, and whoa. So
is he playing for a win?
So there's check and queen e1. There must be some other things here that for black that the pawn a4. I said it was irrelevant, but maybe now it's relevant. I did mention there would be a time that it would be important.
No, that time has come because rook g5, king h6 there. Instead, I can't tell if they're repeating moves or if one of the sides is making progress. Rook e5 now.
Rook e5, mentioned that move earlier. He plays it, and there's queen e4 check. But then the king comes back to g7, and the rook can't move the c3.
Ooh. 2 seconds now. All of a sudden, Sarana slipped really into the clock.
Okay,
king g2, though.
No, rook f3. Rook f3.
Oh.
You can take on f3, and he does it because e5.
And it's a bailout and I think a draw.
It looks like it should be, but no queen time H5. For either player.
Oh, okay.
He's going to go queen e7. Queen e8.
Draw.
They'll go king f6. There's queen h8 check.
I think white can actually, if white can win a7, black is still going to have to give perpetual.
Right. And king g5 is very risky, so he goes queen back to f6. Good idea.
Yeah, draw. Now, one of the sides could blunder here, and yeah, it's a
b5. Trade pawns. King gets the b pawn. King gets the g pawn.
There was a lot of tension there in that game.
Man, it is just like. By the way, Sarana, he's at 3K, but just exactly.
Yep, that's a great place to be. That is a great place to be.
And look at this setup by Sevian. He brings his bishop, snakes it via d3 to c2. Center is well protected. Here's knight b4. We were talking about these sort of Spanish positions where you get knight to b4. This looks kind of like it could have come from the Spanish, but it's from a Sicilian.
Right. We've got several of those positions that kind of have the overtones of our Rai Lopez. But this is a good one for black, I think. He's got the 2 bishops, and he's got the King's Indian idea. We keep just referencing other openings, but he's got the King's Indian idea of going f5.
Yes, f5, also knight f4. Please take me on f4. I want to open up my King's Indian like bishop on g7. So here, queen b8. It looks like a sad. Well, speaking of sad moves, bishop c8.
Okay, but is that because the bishop is a long range piece. It can also support f5.
True, and maybe even some potential on the h3 square, a sacrifice at the right moment. But I didn't really feel good about seeing bishop to c8.
That's fair. That d6 pawn is also something to keep an eye on.
Right, and I was looking at queen b8 and rook f8 to c8. You know, I'm making the rook look silly on 8 for the time being, but not that big a deal.
Right. So what to do now? Bishop e3, just developing his bishop. For sure, f5 is a double-sided coin. That also weakens the position. It's important to note knight g5 is actually possible, I think. f4, knight e6.
Ah, nice. Looking at you finding the tactics, because f4 looks like it wins a piece, cutting off the bishop from the knight, but knight e6 takes, pawn takes. It looks like you can take a bishop on e3, but watch out for e7 with check, and that would win the black.
I would consider f4 anyway, and knight e6 just go queen f6. And then try to get f3, and even if that means sacrificing the exchange, which I will, I would go f4 here.
I can buy that. He plays f4, so knight e6
or queen h4.
He also, after takes, can play queen e. Okay, he did it. Play queen e7.
I don't know about that.
He still has your idea of f3. The e6 pawn can be attacked another time by bringing the rook in, and knight d5 I can just take on e6 because knight d5, queen e6, knight e7 check looks fancy, because my queen is pinned and under attack, but king f7 saves the queen on e6. So I do get away with it.
Something about this, though, now, even if black plays f3, though, white can even go g4, and I feel like black doesn't quite have enough firepower to, to make things happen when push comes to shove. Now, queen takes c6 can be allowed. In that endgame, white has compensation, remember.
Oh, yeah, getting this knight to d5, and the c file always is compensation. I don't know how sufficient it is, but that is what I guess Sevian is relying on. Also, the b7 pawn can be captured if the queen takes an e6 too early. So it's not so easy here for white or black to move. I'd probably play rook a1 to c1, gearing up for the queen to capture on e6 and trying to take control of the open file.
Right. And yeah, the time situation. It's so hard to play these positions in a blitz game because you can get easily kind of drawn into the rabbit hole of trying to understand the nuances of the position, which Sevian is currently doing. He's again a minute down on the clock, and he does go for knight d5. So let's see how this unfolds. Okay, so using the queen as a blockader, knight c7 is a threat.
Watch out for the fork. You go to
Queen
rook to
G4.
the open file, stopping it. Queen g4, I can take and then bring my knight back to f6, but I see what your point. There's knight e7 check.
But at the end of that, knight takes e4. Okay, none of that happens. Rook d1 now, very important to reinforce the control over. It's not about the knight, it's about the control over the d5 square.
Right. It's the square more than what piece is on it, as you're saying, but you do not want to take with a pawn.
Right.
As that isolates your own pawn and it will allow the e-pawn to push it somewhere.
Well, you do now, but unless it's a fork or something.
Of course. So bishop f8 protecting d6, and that's good news for the rook on c6. It is free to roam around the board, but it feels like a bind, as it doesn't actually seem like black is up a pawn because the pawn d6 can't go anywhere.
Right. And we have in some ways a situation similar to the last game where, both sides are unwilling to take the big risk. And so this game might also just peter out into a draw because neither side is making progress. But I think Sarana is making progress. Nobody canceled the idea of just attacking on the king side. So in many ways, white's position optically looks very appealing with that rook on d5. But if Sarana can circumvent it and buy himself time, if he pushes the pawn through to g4, things could get very unpleasant for Sevian.
And the issue is because Sevian is down a pawn and black is playing on both sides of the board right now, his queen on e2 stops g5, but now the queen might need to protect the d5 rook. Or if you take on c5, here it is, the d pawn became a c pawn, and the bishop on e7 feels a little bit better, but the pawn e5 feels a bit worse.
Clearly now it's up a pawn. Black is playing for a win. White's got pretty good drawing chances. Yeah, the pawn on e5, as you said, weak, but we'll see. He opens up the c5 square for his bishop. Potentially, there's also ideas now still of going g5, g4. The attack can actually be very strong in these positions. I would
Bishop
consider
d4
it right now.
as well is a possibility in the near future. Just planting the bishop. Not now. The h5 pawn was angling with check.
What does white do, though? He can get checkmated in 2 moves.
Oh, yeah. Takes, and then g3 check and trying to
Yep. Goodbye.
go to queen h6. And f2 is hanging, by the way.
Now, what if bishop f2?
Queen queen c7 going after
King f6?
King f6, queen d8 check.
King g6.
I see you trying to move around. h4, he plays it to try to, but there's got to be a back rank mating idea.
Oh my goodness, g3, f3, and then queen h3 is there. But white has queen g5 check.
And then take on h5 with check, and then, yeah. So Donnie's point is if you get f3 and you take, there's queen h3 mate, but queen g5 check. I take on h5 with check. I take on f3 with check.
Funny thing is, if you play g3 and f3, black is actually threatening the move queen h3.
Yes, exactly. To give up the queen. I was thinking about that too before. So like if you make some random move, like bishop e5 is queen h3 check, takes, and g2 and g1 equals queen mate. Well, let's get to the live position. Bishop g3 check played, and the threat of queen g5 is undoubtedly scaring Sarana. Whoa.
Okay, I'm glad he didn't take on f3. That would have lost a piece. So he is stopping that at all costs. I really like that idea, actually.
He didn't throw in queen g5 check, and now he may be paying the price for that.
Right.
Because the bishop covers the square.
So is he getting checkmated here?
Even queen d3 check might be a winning endgame.
Or queen f3 takes the pawn with check.
Oh,
yep, you're absolutely right.
Oh.
Because look at that pawn on h4.
Bishop d2. The king can't get in for black.
Oh, my lands.
The king can't get in. So
wait, what about king f6?
Well,
bishop f4. Who's winning? No, it's black.
He went b3, so that probably was wrong.
Okay, so the king comes around, and then d7, c6, b5. That's got
bishop
too
g3
many
right
weaknesses.
Now. Win the h4 pawn. That seems good enough.
It does. Outside passer. You got to make sure that white doesn't close everything up. But there's that b5 hole, so the king could actually head that way, and the pawn could head the other way, and white's resources will be too extended.
Right. And black does not want to be left with the h-pawn. Does not match the color of the bishop, but unfortunately for white, you can't trade off queenside pawns. Your pawn's an a5, not in a square that allows a trade.
Now the king is cut off. There's just no way that... But, okay, bishop g3.
G3 is so smart. Defending both pawns at the same time. Now the king can just walk in.
But where exactly?
So I'll go. Oh, yeah. How about
Rest.
king? Wait a
Yeah,
second.
he's trying the other direction, but is that border close too? I don't think it is.
King
Because you can go
G4
king G4 and promote.
and bishop G. Oh, promotion and king F3. That's nice.
Yes.
I was thinking bishop G3, king F4, but you're right. He's got to go for the promotion. And
He does.
Wow, that's
And
really
it's
nice.
still a game, but it is king D3 there was a little bit more precise, but this is also winning. Bishop D2, E4.
Yeah.
And the pawn endgame is, of course, winning. The king is so much closer to the pawns. Yeah, goodbye.
Gobble, gobble.
Indeed. Wow, what a game. So close. Sevian put up a great fight, but Alexei with an iron fist there. Nerves of steel, and he delivers another victory. The lead still stubbornly at 2 points.
And he wants to keep his 3,000 plus rating. That's what it was all about. Sarana 3,007, Sevian 2,943, no slouch either. And we have a Benoni. So the openings have been changing in the quicker time control here. And what do you make of this decision from Sevian? To me, it seems like he feels the urge to win. So he's playing a sharper opening, but has some real structural damage in the form of this pawn on d6.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opening that this will either go very, very well or very badly. I don't think this game will end in a draw, which is probably precisely why it will. And just we notice here that the odds are, they're obviously they have increased in Sarana's favor, but it's not like Smarter Chess is predicting a blowout. There's a big possibility, this could turn in one game. And I think that's precisely what Sam is trying to do. He realizes, okay, the 3-minute portion is drawing to a close. He wants to make that run before the bullet. He doesn't want to have to deal with a 2-3 point lead going to the bullet. Interesting strategy. We'll see if this gamble backfires or whether it pays off.
Well, based on the clock management thus far, it seems like it's not going so well for Sevian. He is taking on e5 with his pawn, and look at this the c5 pawn. I said a5 because I was thinking of white playing a5.
Yeah.
Knight to a4. But this protected passer on d5, the c5 pawn is a clear target, and even if it doesn't, win that pawn, it just doesn't feel good for black to be stuck to its defense.
Right, and knight e8, knight d6 is the classic plan here, blockading the pawn. But that doesn't tell the whole story. There's so many weaknesses in this position that actually might not even help. Because white actually also, okay, so he goes for a different strategy. He goes knight h5. He's getting the knight potentially to f4. Black, and this is one of the good things, Robert, about the Benoni and these types of openings is even when everything goes wrong, because of the nature of the opening and how unbalanced it is, there's always going to be counterplay, regardless of how objectively bad the position is.
And it looks pretty bad to my 4 eyes here, because knight f4, I can drop my bishop back to f1, say, I'm not going to take that. I don't want to open up this bishop on g7. And it just feels like a bind. And eventually white can play g3 and kick that knight. But I really want to play bishop f1, king h1, f3, bishop g1. I want to reroute my bishop to a more useful looking diagonal.
This is, there's just no, there is a knight on f4 that looks nice, but, you're not going to build a kingdom around that knight.
No. And there's also a possibility for white to take it and play e5 at some moment. I don't think now is the time because you're not ready to put more pressure on the bishop on e5. But the point is that you're potentially walking into a pin if you capture on e5.
Which you might be ready for. Well, now you're not ready for it either, is d6. That also has to be considered in certain positions, opening up the diagonal. Sarana, I think, is going for a plan where he wants to push b4. I think he wants to target that, and Sevian, realizing that, immediately goes for the threats here, queen back to g3. Again, saying, no, you aren't going to make anything happen on the king side.
And he actually might take with the pawn on g3. Queen g3, pawn takes. Your knight has to go back to h5. I go g4. If your knight goes to f6, down goes e5. If your knight comes back to f4, at some point I may have g3 trapping your knight on the square. So
but knight e6, that is an idea that Sarana has to pay attention to. The knight could swing to d4. So I think we're going to see rook b1 at some point, followed by b4.
Wow, knight e6 was almost a possibility there, but I see your point. You need to watch out along the d5 if this rook is ever hanging on d1. But that's why Sarana, he's put his king on h1. No knight checks, nothing like that. And here...
Okay, so here's the plan.
Progress.
Bishop g1, then bishop f1, and you go after the c pawn. You put a rook on c1, you move the queen away, and then you play f3. I know that's a very long plan. Now, he wants to chase the knight away with g3. You could consider d6 here because... Well, no, I wouldn't go anything that drastic, but something where you go after that c pawn, I think, makes some sense.
I've been looking at that idea. I'm not sure I love the inclusion of the pawn on h4,
Right.
but he's saying that it won't backfire. I'm actually safe on the king side.
King
And
G2.
bishop e2, then he has to play f3, bishop g1 at some point.
Yeah, now f5 comes into play. I agree with you. I think with that pawn on h4, there's just enough tenderness on the king side to where Sevian can start considering active counterplay. Has Sarana underestimated these kingside chances? I think he has. Things start to get a little bit tight here.
And the best thing that Sevian is doing is he's moving quickly. In fact, he's
Yes.
keeping pace with Sarana. And the bishop on h2, that looks like a great piece, if I say so myself.
Amazing. It is controlling everything, really. It is just the czar of the board here.
f5. It's time. Because now you can take with the pawn on f5 as the knight on h5 is no longer under attack. So there's a big difference. This knight can swing back to f6 if it has to. And I'm starting to like Black's position more, although knight f6 drops the f5 pawn.
Well, the bishop, yeah, it is socially distancing itself. But the only person who might like that bishop is Dr. Anthony Fauci, but otherwise. But it might not even be about that bishop, but I think it is. Knight takes d5. Look at this.
Okay, queen is under attack. If this pawn were on g2, I might recommend a queen sack on f8, but the pawn is on g3, so the bishop's not hitting the e5 square. And if that's the case, queen back to b1. How about just knight f6 retreat? Oh, I just grabbed that g pawn back, so knight f6 is played. And there's a possibility if you take on d7, queen h3, you have to be careful about the light squares around the white king. And here it goes.
Uh-oh. The position is opened up. I think you're right on the money. Queen h3 is a huge idea. e4, now the bishop opens up. The bishop on h2, Robert. Now Alexei is paying a very serious price for that bishop. When the position was closed, I mean, you didn't detect it, and here comes queen h3.
You have to play queen f1 because knight g4 is such a big threat.
I wouldn't trade queens. I would go queen f5. And
queen f5, then knight g4, then
the
bishop d4, and the bishop on h2, clearly not a good piece.
Absolutely. Just the kitchen sink coming along the f-file after knight g4, bishop d4 with 20 seconds on the clock. Now it's so hard to play for white. Does he give up the e4 pawn, though?
I think he does because there's some kind of queen d1 checks. There's bishop d4. You have to look all across the board for the various threats.
Knight f2, yeah, and bishop d4. Here we go.
Uh-oh, that's a problem. That's
knight h3.
You have no time.
This is
8
losing,
seconds.
I think. It's mating.
The gamble is looking like it's going to pay off for Sevian.
Now, you've got to be precise because queen g8 mate comes into play in certain positions. Queen g4, rook f2, bishop d4 still works.
No, oh yes, it does.
Yeah, queen d4, queen d4.
Nice find. Bishop d4 is protected because I can take over with the queen.
But wait a second. Rook f2, bishop d4, king h1.
I knew what you were going to say there. But this move, king g2,
queen
that
h3.
walks the queen h3 check, knight g4 back. And then there's f1 is mate, h2 is hanging, bishop d4 check is a threat.
Too many avenues and directions and threats. Knight g4, queen g2 maybe, but then bishop d4, yeah, okay, immediately. And knight g4, rook f1 is mate.
Yes, it is, rook f1. Ooh.
Wow.
This rook on e2 misplaced because the bishop was cut off.
And he vacillated too much to Sarana. I think he had to decisively act on the queen side. Amazing job, though, by Sam to generate counterplay, detecting the moment and pouncing mercilessly.
Yeah, he was playing very quickly, which that's been a struggle for him throughout this match. He's been down on the clock, and he's had much less time to figure out the complications. In that game, he was keeping pace with Sarana, and then not only kept pace, he actually took a lead in the clock and was starting to seize the momentum on the board. So here we have a position where Sevian is white. There is this little triangle here with the pawns, c6, d5, e6. And what do you make of this opening? Because I don't know, I don't really mind it for either side.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay, so DC is an interesting choice. It weakens both players' pawn structure. It opens up that potential avenue of trade on the D file. I think it's about equal. I mean, I would take probably white here because of the disparity in the bishop placement. So I don't know. I mean, you have to decide what you take on c4 with, first of all. Bishop takes seems a little bit more natural to eliminate that tension, but I could see a case being made for BC because later on, white's bishop, if you eliminate the pressure on the c4 pawn, white's bishop could land on f3, and he does exactly that. Again, though, we see Sarana jumping out to the early lead on time.
And that actually not sure I like the decision to keep queens on the board for black. You mentioned the c4 pawn, and if that gets defended, the bishop can leave e2, and it's easier to protect c4 with the queens on the board. It's easier to protect the b2 bishop with the queens on the board, and I just feel like with white having a slight spatial edge, thanks to this pawn on c4, it could go very well. And a3 now will kick the rook back, but that leaves the b3 square more vulnerable. It's a tough
And
decision.
also the a3 pawn itself is going to
True.
be a bit more weak.
Very, very true here. And I don't know how this should go, but I'm looking eventually for like a bishop d3, but this is not. I mean, I don't like.
Well, he wants. I mean, rook bishop c3 is of course the threat, but it just seems a little bit too artificial.
Yeah, queen a4 is what I'd play here. Trade the queens off.
Also, queen takes a2. There's rook a1. That's another trap. But yeah, queen a4 exactly.
Bishop on a6 is hanging, so he couldn't even take on a2. I wasn't even looking down there. I figured that it was immune to capture. If Sevian is giving up the pawn, like don't take it. And now we're back here with the c4 pawn is still weak. As I mentioned, the queen trade should favor black. b2 is something that is harder to defend. The c4 pawn as well. And
bishop a3 is possible here, trying to liquidate and then taking on b1 with the knight. But that's a move you play if you're just shooting for equality and you're trying to bail out.
Right, because the end of it, the black knight come to e4, the rook come to b8 or d8. You pick a file of your choosing. So it's a way for white to defend, and he actually does this. Good call, Danya. And I do think that black should be the preferred side. Rook d8, there's rook d1. Rook b8,
rook b1.
There's rook b1. So
rook
we
b8,
see
there's
that
rook d1. and if rook b8, there is, guess what, rook b1.
And if rook a8,
there's rook a1.
Okay,
rook
just
rook a1.
But I think that Sarana has no problem here whatsoever.
Right. No, I mean he has the choice here. Now, one thing to note, don't get the king to d6 here because of c5.
Nice. That's one way to blunder is if it's a check. Or don't play knight b6, because knight b6 is still c5.
There is. Now c5, knight takes c5 defends the bishop. So they see these things. They eat these things for breakfast. I mean, they do not miss these kinds of moves. Okay, I don't want to jinx him, but don't miss these kinds of moves.
And king c5 is possible, but king c3, knight b6, knight d2. So
oh my god, mate.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for, honestly. I'm trying to defend the pawn and go for a checkmate. He plays c5, which I think is smarter. And
Draw.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to show that mate on the board because it's funny.
It is
here,
funny.
Knight b6, knight d2, knight e4 is checkmate. Knight b3 also would win a piece with c5 check, so that would put his king in some danger.
So knight b6 would be a really good move, is what you're saying.
It was just an excellent move in that position, for sure.
Okay, so there is one thing that, obviously symbolically, I think black is the one with the pull because of his pressure on c4, but it is so insignificant because white has allocated all of his resources. And actually, don't laugh, but eventually if white reroutes his knight to c3 via b1, and he goes a4, a5, potentially the move knight b5 could be a little bit unpleasant. I don't think any of this is going to happen. I'm just saying black can't fall asleep here either.
Certainly not. And what black can do is think about pushing some pawns in the king side, but that also has risks in and of itself, because if you push your pawns, they may become more susceptible to being attacked, and that's why Sarana puts his bishop on c6, covering that b5 square. So please, go knight b5, win my pawn on a7. I'll actually not going to allow that. I'll take you, and then it would be a favorable transition. At least that's
right. So they're maneuvering. There is some life. Again, okay, knight comes back to b, probably to d2 to just secure everything a little bit more soundly. Is Sevian regretting that move h4? Well, I don't think that Sarana has the resources to make him regret it.
Yeah, because you put two attackers in f3, and just quickly put two defenders there.
Okay, knight f6, knight h5.
I like this. g5 coming.
Okay. I do think Sevian should have just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't think he should have moved anything on the king side.
And actually, if you take on c6, does that help white or black? Because the knight versus bishop dynamic can be hard to assess. He instead allows the knight to come right back to d2.
The knight is jumping around constantly, and it's hard to deal with no time on the clock.
True. I didn't even look at the clock. Sevian once again down a lot of time. He's down a minute. And here we see g5 played. And is the king coming to e5? Is the knight coming to e5? Well, now neither is. And g4 play. Watch out for this knight coming to h5.
Mm-hmm. And knight f1, bishop g2. Sevian tries to net that in the bud, but knight d4, that's a big square. I guess it's a fortress.
That's the claim, at least.
You know who doesn't believe in fortresses? Bishop f3.
Oh, bishop f3, that's a sneaky move. But king b6 trying to go king a5.
Wow.
And
bishop can come to a4.
Okay, here comes the bishop.
Uh-oh. King a5, knight b3, though. I think that forces a draw.
Right. So the knights get traded, then there is a fortress because you can't attack a dark square pawn with a light square bishop.
How do you even get to h5? You need to get to g7 to get to h5. I don't think there's a mathematical way to do that, amazingly.
That is... I'm looking
It's
at the
actually
board
really
here.
funny. Oh, there literally isn't a way to get to h5. Physically.
No, there's not. You need to get to g7, which is via e8, but there's no way to get to... What, knight c6, knight b6, knight c8, knight b6, knight e8, knight c7, knight e8. You get the point.
Oh my god, that is the most epic plan of all time. Watch him do it, though. He has all the time in the world. And at the end of that, White just plays knight f1 and offers a draw.
True. But I hope he goes for it, just to show you that it is possible.
Right.
Miracles do
I think
happen.
he is. I think he's going to go for it, and at the end of knight f1, they're going to make a draw.
Yeah, and there's nothing that White can do whatsoever.
Sacrifices.
Because you have these pawns under control. You can't even attack e6 ever.
Right. I mean, this is always your hand is shaking here. It's unpleasant to defend this, but if you just stay vigilant, and there he goes.
Well, he's not.
Wait, where is it going again?
He needs to go to a8 to c7 to e8 to g7.
That's
to
hilarious.
So yeah, he needs to get this knight to a8. Bam.
So he'll have to play knight b8 d7, move the king over. So that's like the longest plan in the history of endgames.
And it would just allow White to make an immediate draw, so it doesn't work.
Yeah. And, well, he plays a5. Okay, that doesn't actually do much.
It gives you the a6 square, so you can go to e8 and...
I think he's trying to lull Sevian to sleep, and now he's going to mount that maneuver. Mark my words. He's going to go knight b4, knight a6.
He actually has a draw.
He does go knight b4.
So, excuse me, those words have been marked, but now what do I do with them?
I have a couple of things you can do with them, but I will not. I will share that during the break.
Oh, you're just the most polite co-commentator.
I'm immaculately polite.
And we have another Benoni. Sevian probably has some fond memories of the result of the last Benoni, but likely not the position that he had.
Yeah, no, he doesn't want to get that. Allow Sarana to have that pawn again on d5. What do you think, Robert?
Well, it's here it comes, bishop f4.
They're looking like it increasingly. Now, one thing that I was taught a long time ago is maybe this is completely out of touch with reality, but if Black has to put a queen on e7 in the Benoni, that usually means that, well, because the possibility of e5 now is essentially forcing Black's hand. So that is why Sevian acquiesced to knight e5. Maybe knight h5 and then knight e5. No, he does it again. I can't believe it, but that was a really, really bad position.
Yeah, I don't enjoy this at all. And he spent time to get the same position. So I don't think he trusts it either. When you spend 30 seconds, your opponent is moving just instantly every single turn, and then you have the same position that we didn't like, and bishop g4. So something about it Sarana didn't like either, but are you inviting f5 at some point? Ooh, okay, queen g5. Watch out for your g2.
Uh-oh. I think that what this is... Wait, but ef?
Yeah, wait, what is this?
Now, let me tell you one thing. I think that what Sevian is doing is a conscious psychological ploy. He knows that the position is bad. He knows. But if Sarana fails to win this again, and it increasingly is looking like Black is recovering again, he is going to be particularly frustrated. So it's a gamble, but I think it just might pay off.
I'm with you because right now I don't see how White's pawns are moving forward, and I do see a potential for h5, queen h4, g5, g4. Sounds like I made many moves.
b5, it's like everywhere now. All of a sudden, Black is the one with an advantage. Maybe White should just play d6, knight d5, but I don't buy that either.
That could just lose your d pawn.
Yeah, well, it will. I was just thinking of putting a knight on d5, but that alone, that doesn't give much.
Right.
Oh, man.
So what else can White do here? Queen to e2 to attack a6 comes to mind because you want to provoke a5. That seems to give me the b5 square. I wouldn't complain about that.
Right. I mean... Perhaps Rook T2, I was going to propose liberating. Knight B1, Knight A3 is an idea.
Queen E2 would have been a big blunder, just to show that.
Ooh,
Queen
nice.
E2 would have walked in F3, pin here, checkmate on G2, for hanging on D2 as well. So don't move that queen too soon.
It's
can you still play F3? Like in sack and go Rook F6?
You can. That's
Probably
interesting.
not smart. Probably not smart.
You could go Rook F6 and probably force the queen back to F3.
Right, because Rook F6, pawn F3, then you're giving up all the dark squares. So
okay, but what
H4
about
here?
now? No, still probably not enough.
What if I go queen h4, g5, g4? How are you going to stop me?
Knight e2, knight g1, but then I go g4. When your knight is on g1, it doesn't make it to f3.
Yeah, that doesn't look like it's good enough. This knight needs to move up a square to c4.
Right.
And the a6 pawn is hanging over here, so that's something that you have to keep some attention to. He plays rook to b8. Don't take on a6. There's pawn f3. That
right. That's a vicious little tactic. Maybe
There's
White
also
should just go f3.
F3. Then you're inviting g4 eventually.
That's true. I was just gonna say you take a gamble and you just try to go for the queen side, but no, that's not going to pay off.
And I wonder if Black's trying to go b5 himself.
Yeah, he definitely is. And the time is the only thing in Sarana's favor that he can try to harness. If he can make this complicated, then his time advantage may make it spread. So f3 is possible here because that f2 pawn might fall. Okay, so he does that maneuver. I like it.
Bringing the knight into f3, you called it. And c4 is possible for Black, gaining some space. He does it.
Even knight f3 here should be considered. Yeah.
Is there queen takes g2? No, because king g2 and then bishop e5 falls at the end of the variation.
Good thing Sam didn't pre-move something because expecting the queen to move. Queen a3 now. I would like invite the pawns forward. Okay, queen e2 also makes sense. Stopping b4.
And this queen can replace the bishop, and it's still a blockade for Black. And this e4 pawn down here, we haven't highlighted that. You can play f3, as we've talked about in other variations, but then the dark squares are still under Black's control, despite the fact that the bishop is traded off.
Right. And, okay, so, again, I think Sarana can take on e5 at his leisure. I think that now I think that Sam has sort of underestimated this maneuver of the knight to f3. Look at this. If rook b8, rook takes c4 has to be dealt with.
Right, because the rook is hanging on b8.
And this is precisely what I think we noticed about the clock. Now Sevian has to burn into his reserves to deal with these threats. He's under 30 seconds. This has taken a turn for the worse for Black.
Yeah, because you can just take on e5 and then take on c4, but the e4 pawn is hanging at the end. However, this d pawn is trying to run. So he plays queen c5, going right after the rook on b6. Knight takes e5 is a threat. He plays rook to b8 to protect everything, including the b5 pawn. And this is just one of those positions where it feels like White should be better, but proving it is immensely difficult.
He's trying to play d6.
Wait, is b2 hanging?
It is, but then d6, I think.
And then c3? Like, whose pawn is better?
I think he blundered it, but he's going to pretend it's a sacrifice.
It turns out to probably not be so bad.
No. I don't think it's great, but I think e5, and maybe you sack on... Okay, rook d4. Ooh, I would be scared to play that move, because c2...
Yeah.
What is going on here?
And there's e5, e6 ideas. The bishop is cut out from the protection of the king on g7, but...
Knight d4 is also in the mix. Yeah, e6 I would consider, and then just play knight d4 after that.
Yeah, e6 looks pretty dangerous.
Or knight g5, because you just leave the rook on d5 because of the fork on e6. I think
of
he's
course,
calculating it.
With playing e6, and the d6 pawn becomes weaker.
Knight g5, yeah.
Knight g5. Queen d7 is like a desperate... But then maybe there's a queen c7 for White. You just have to consider all these possibilities.
And rook e1. Okay, he gives a check. But queen f6, what is his idea?
Yeah, there's also c2 coming.
Whoa.
C2. And the rook and d5's hanging.
So that was a terrible move, I think.
That was a really bad
That was a horrible move.
Do we have
and he had plenty of time on his clock.
Yeah, that was not good. I don't have an explanation for that.
Queen no, that was a hallucination. I think he thought the king had to move, and he saw something, got excited. Even if the king moved, though, I mean, Black had c2. He walked right into the X-ray of the bishop, and now was just losing.
Donna, you missed it, but Sevian took a sip of water there.
Sip of water. No, I'm saying the Peter Giannatta's theorem.
It has been mathematically proven to be true.
It has. C2. Oh.
Yeah, it's just one check.
Oh, I thought there was some mating ideas, but no.
Now, king h6. There's no even knight f6 because I got h4, knight g5.
h4, knight g5. Pre-move rook h7.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. He didn't even get a queen. He's like, let me trade off your rook
down.
So I get this queen here.
He's saying, nope, no. No, I don't want to see any of that.
This is just...
That is a blow. If Sevian can take this home, that is a big blow to end the 3-minute portion. The lead will still be at 2 points. That is exactly, I believe, where they started.
No, it won't be. It won't be 2 points. It'll be even.
Oh yeah. Sorry, it's the other way. You were saying. Yeah.
So we're gonna have a thriller in the bullet.
Careful, even stalemate.
Oh, that was close. That was close. Rook h8 check. Go for the sacrificial rook.
He sees it and he knows it, and he is
h4,
very precise here. Sarana's trying for stalemate, but.
King g4. Just play king g4. You're attacking the rook. You're threatening bishop g3.
Primo
Easily
versus
winning.
G3 resigns. It is indeed tied, Robert. We kind of could sense it. This was going to be the closest match yet. Guess what? Well, it has delivered. That was some incredible action in the 3-minute portion.
It certainly was. And for Sarana, he's probably quite frustrated with himself because he had a lead throughout this match. And now it's tied heading to the bullet where it's really a toss up because even if one player is higher rated, unless it's a huge disparity like we saw Nihal Sarin win yesterday against Anton Smirnov, it's anybody's match at this point.
It is. And we will catch our breaths. And when we return, 30 minutes of 1+1. Buckle up.
We'll be back shortly, everybody. And we return ready for the bullet portion of what has been a stellar matchup. Two evenly matched players, Sam Sevian and Alexei Sarana. Before the match even began, Danya, we saw that the predictions, it was as pretty much as close as it gets. 55% odds in Sevian's favor, 45% for Sarana. Danya, we're in the bullet now. What do you think?
Indeed, and the Smarter Chess prediction has been the case very often. It has been right on the money, and well, it predicts a very close bullet segment, and I think that's to be expected. Now we've seen in the preview, we've seen some close matches decided by the bullet, but we've seen a lot of cases where one player basically just runs away with it in the first couple of games. I dare say I don't think that's going to happen here. I mean, these players have been so close, and the games have been so tightly contested. I don't see a reason why one player should run away with it, but obviously you never know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's tough to say with these two competitors because they've been evenly matched throughout. Sarana had a lead. Sevian came back just now. So Sevian probably is feeling good about himself, at least relative to what he was feeling a little while ago. And in bullet, especially with the increment, that makes all the difference. And Sarana has been faster, but Sevian has proven mighty in the last bunch. And look at their ratings, by the way. They're about the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, those Benoni games is important for Sarana to make sure they don't get under his skin, that he sort of resets. And we do have another Najdorf here, which, of course, is right in Alexei's wheelhouse. But probably Sam, as has been the case, has prepared certain openings specifically for the bullet.
And watch out for bishop f3. Isn't that just...
F5.
Wait a sec. No, there's 97 queen d5 check. There has to be.
Probably there's like a queen trap there. I mean, there's definitely... Alexei knows this.
You sure? You sure, buddy?
I don't know. Maybe simply down the rook. Oh, my lands.
I mean, these are like known
something.
tactics when you can't take on e4 because of the light squares. And Sarana hasn't really moved from his stance, but he's not over that.
This reminds me of an Agadmatar video, and of course, best wishes to Agadmatar, who it appears that his heart surgery went well, so prayers and support to him. But there was a funny video he shared of one of his games where he blundered a rook in exactly this fashion, and he pulled this stunt where he was pretending that he had something up his sleeve, but in reality he wanted to resign, and his opponent believed him. But here, there was just nothing at all.
No, this is a clean extra rook for Sevian. And as you said, we wish Antonio our very best and hope that he has a smooth recovery. Hello, everyone. Let's wish him the best, and hopefully he'll be back making videos soon. But for now, if you're an Alexei Sarana fan, you better hope that he's going to rebound fast because there's not that much time left, 28 minutes. All of it's going to be bullet. And look at this. We have the Budapest from Sevian.
I was going to make a pun with Antonio's last name. I was going to say it was a radical development. But
oh,
yeah,
boy.
That is a blow right there in the early going, as Budapest indeed. That is a bullet opening if I've ever seen one. Now, it's not actually, Robert, objectively, it's not that bad. Like, it's at best, I think White gets a slight advantage, which he has gotten.
Yeah, you're right, though, because Black has the typical access to the A file. The bishop on b7 looks very good. There's no d pawn to go d5 and shut down that bishop from b7. But for now, I would say that White is slightly better, but Black is hanging in there just fine.
Indeed, and well, c5.
c5, exactly, trying to chip away at the pawn
Some
chain.
pressure, okay. But no, I think it should be in the realm of a draw, but these positions are so hard to play with a bullet. But look at the times. They both have a minute remaining, essentially.
What about knight e4? Because
Yeah,
after
just
knight e4,
try to bail out. Nice c3. Ooh, nice.
yeah, I'm also trying to take on g3. Like, everything is sort of hanging in White's position. So even if you win a pawn, your pawn structure will be shattered. So knight e4, I'm looking at c takes d6, knight takes g3 here, and you have to take back with the f pawn.
And he's taking his time. He has left himself a good amount of time to calculate. He knows that if indeed this is a draw, he's going to be able to survive, but he's got to move relatively fast. I mean, with 10 seconds, that's going to be quite hard.
Yeah, so he does take on c5.
He didn't like about it. I don't know. Now he's definitely... It should be still a draw, but okay. I mean, I think here the realistic practical chances are higher, Robert. Okay.
Yeah, this... Oh, and now with the double pawns, the c5 pawn, is it a strength? Is it a liability?
I don't like what Sarana just did there, because those pawns, and I mentioned this yesterday, can actually be an asset. I know it sounds ridiculous, that even if Black trades bishops and gives up c5, that is almost impossible to win because those pawns act kind of like a sponge. They sop up any attempts that white may have at pushing his own pawns, if that makes sense. Not to say that he's going to give up. He's not even going to give up c5 easily.
I thought he was going to go king a4 there, but he didn't want to get his king cut off all the way on the flank.
That's a nice idea.
Rook f4, rook f5 is possible. You play e4, g4, and bring the rook into f5.
Right. And that's not to say winning attempts are not possible with those pawns, but it's not like completely winning for white, is what I'm saying.
And this rook can go back and forth along the back rank here, putting pressure on g2, protecting pawn c5. Here goes rook to g8. Rook e5 check. And then there's a possibility for this king.
Rook d3.
Oh, that's also looking good. So he gives the rook e4 offering the trade.
Filigree accuracy by Sarana, just not allowing any of these attempts. I mean, this is very creative defensive play.
It's what you said. Even if you lose the c pawn, this is still looking like a theoretically drawn position.
Alex Yermolinsky taught me this in a lesson I had with him years and years ago, and I never forgot this. He's like, those pawns, they can be the greatest defensive asset in a 3-on-4 endgame. He didn't say it exactly like that. Daniel, I would say look at the game. I mean, every Russian schoolboy knows that the pawns that look the ugliest, in fact, succeed the most. But
and these pawns are doing just that, you know? It's funny. How does white even win this game? King f5, f4 somehow?
You know what you do? You play the classic bullet, rook b5, rook c3, rook a3. They try to make the rook get onto, but that's where the increment eliminates this kind of play. No, but this is not a serious attempt. I mean, he's doing what he can, of course, as he should, but there's no way to make progress. And I mean, you can see here very clearly how the pawns, exactly, they're like spikes burying that vampire.
Although if you were Anton Smirnov, you would have really traumatic recollections of this position because he was up a pawn and he lost on time against Nihal Sarin yesterday. But this is just easy for black to hold. You keep your rook behind the pawns. If a pawn's ever traded, then there's no winning chances.
Well, maybe white can try, of course, to get the king somewhere. Rook f5, slowly.
We've been there before, right, with the rook on f5, so...
King h6, I don't know about. I guess rook f3. Whoa. Yes. Now he might have screwed this up.
That's possible because if you trade this back. Rook e3, rook e3.
Stay. Lands.
Keep your rook behind the pawn.
He should not have gone to h6.
I'm with you. That looks really bad, actually.
Yes. Now wait a second. Wait a second.
Rook f5, for sure.
And then back. Wait 7.3 seconds.
Because rook g4. So
yeah, rook g7. It's winning.
Rook g7?
Unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable. We've seen this now several times.
Don't play e6. Rook g2 is good. The king is cut off. You're going to push your pawn, and then
it's just an easy Lucena. Well, you don't even need the Lucena position.
How? How did this happen? He had everything
h6.
Under control.
It's just, what it shows is that in rooking, there's always going to be that one attempt. And here it is indeed the classic Lucena position. You build a bridge. And Sarana probably learned this before he learned how to walk.
Here's the bridge. He makes it. He promotes the pawn. And that is why we saw resignation. We have a tied match once again.
We do. And that was incredible. I mean, he squeezed the life out of the position, found what he needed to find, and that critical mistake, thinking that the game is already over. Whoa.
What?
Did you see what just happened there?
No, I wasn't looking.
Look at that. That was a Jabava London, and Sevian played knight e2 and then knight back to g1 around to f3.
What? Is that typical at all?
No. I mean, not saying I'm an authority on the subject, even though I've played the Jabava London for years. I've never seen that before. It makes some sense. I mean, the thing with the Jabava is it's not like in these positions every tempo is crucial.
Right. That's true, because the position remains closed for a bit, and so there's no like quick attack or anything of the sort. So right now,
White is better.
White is definitely better.
Much better.
You have the control of the c file. You also have a pawn majority on the queen side over here, and black's pawns don't get to mobilize very easily. You can't push e5 without picking d5. You push d4, I take you. You're left with double isolated pawns.
Okay, this is a good explanation, Robert, but maybe defense. Okay, but this is just looking terrible. I mean, look at the crunch that we saw a game like this a little bit earlier. I think it was Sevian who was also the one dominating that queen side. We see something similar here. It's not about winning a particular pawn. It's just black's position as a whole that is not really holding together. Although I like what Sarana is doing, trying to trade as many pieces as possible, intercepting the c-file. This is serious progress now in the defensive end.
Oh, yeah, because now black's pawns can actually
Whoa.
push E5, D4, and whose pawns are better? Play E5. And
That's
king
crazy.
F7. Like, black's just much better now.
Just shows you in the bullet, things can turn around in the snap of a finger. You miss one opportunity to make progress. Boom. Tables turn.
Ooh. And all right, so here the bishop on C4 is just better than the counterpart on D1. The bishop on G3 stuck to the defense of this pawn on H4. Black with plenty of time hitting now the B4 pawn.
Queen H8.
Okay, so is that a... I guess you have enough to hold the balance there.
Well, it depends. There's a lot of tactical ideas in this position. Queen H7, though, because
bishop G7 is
bishop
Queen F8.
E5, Queen F8. Oh,
Holding on by a
close.
thread.
Indeed, indeed. He's got to go Queen C8, I think.
Right, because if you get your queen trapped over here and then the black queen can trade it off, that looks like a losing attempt rather than a winning attempt. Oh, wait. No, he's doing it, but Queen F8?
He sees something.
And then there's
G4
Queen G8.
at the end. Maybe G4 at the end.
But there's just Queen G8.
Takes and takes and takes.
I guess the pawn is hanging there.
I do agree with you, though. E5 or A5 can be considered in some positions to fix that pawn on A4.
But Queen G8 is the only move, because if we take on G4, there's threats of bishop takes E6 with check, dislodging the king from the defense of anything on G7. So
exactly. You have to do it. I don't know why he's taking so long.
If he doesn't do it, he's just probably going to get in huge trouble.
I just failed to see what else there is. And now we see this endgame where white is the outside passer. But as you correctly pointed out, Robert, that pawn mass is serious manga-esque material.
It really is. And D3, bishop A2, bishop B1, bishop C2. That's like a long way to go, but that's a possibility.
But also, look at the pawn on A6. You point these things out. Bishop G4, bishop C8. That might create, all of a sudden, very unpleasant circumstances for black.
And he brings bishop to B3. Bishop G8 would help the pawn push, but you have to watch out for this D pawn.
Whose pawn is faster? King G5.
King G5.
Oh, no. And now white, F4 check probably he has to play.
No, but there's en passant and like...
Oh, Sarana. King, bishop H5, F3. It's
wrong color pawn. Wrong pawn.
Unbelievable.
It's a draw. Wrong pawn with the bishop.
Yeah. You just keep the king there. You don't get the king out. Amazing.
Yeah, this is a draw. And we should remind everybody, as this game was drawn, the match is still level at this point, that if at the end of this bullet portion it is a tie, we will have an additional 4 1 minute plus 1 second increment games to try to break the tie. And if that little mini match is tied, we get to Armageddon, where white will have 5 minutes, black will have 3 minutes, and black gets draw odds. So
a distinct possibility, Robert, but we haven't seen a match this close. We've seen close matches. This is literally down to the wire.
Oh, yeah. What a save that was from both players. It looked like Sarana was taking the advantage, and then all of a sudden, Sevian had some chances, and then Sevian realized, okay, the wrong colored bishop with the corner. Oh, knight d5.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No. You're good to interrupt. There's tactics on the board, and now Sevian's up a pawn.
In e4, this is not winning, of course, but here c6 has to be prepared quickly. He has to get the center open, move the rook a6 and c6. Sarana's doing a great job here limiting that potential.
You might laugh, Danya. I think practically this is easier for white to play.
No, I would prefer to have white. Completely agree. Because I think he had that one opportunity. He has to prevent. I like bishop c6 though, but look at him trying to prevent it. A4.
A4. The knight can come to c5 if you're not careful.
A8.
You have to be careful about that, right? So bishop c6.
So Sarana's showing indications that he's going to attack also on the king side potentially with g4.
That's a good point, and that could backfire because it may weaken your own king. But for now, he can put his queen on c6.
Oh, but then knight on c5.
Wait. Where's that queen going?
Oh
my gosh, you have to go knight d8.
Rook a8. But then rook a7.
Yeah, rook a7 after rook e8, and
knight c5. I mean, that's not the end of the world.
No, this is bad.
Get the queen out. Queen f6. I don't think this is that bad though.
Just rook c7. What are you gonna do?
Knight, queen f6 now. Yeah, I agree. Rook c7 is more accurate. Queen f6 gets counterplay.
Does queen takes b6 and I have e4? I don't know, man. I mean,
G5?
I see you.
No, mark my words. You see, I've already told you this once. Black is going to get serious counterplay. I'm not going to say he's going to win. Okay. This is not going to be obvious. There we go.
Ooh, G5. I like that move a lot. Queen C6, hitting the rook on.
Sorry, no.
Rook 8. Can I play just rook 8? I didn't like giving the queen access here. King E2.
I know, and now F5. F5 is another option.
Oh, you're right. F5 now. Because I wanted to play rook A8.
Knight B4, fork. He drops the exchange and queen takes G3.
Oh my gosh.
Did you mark my words?
I marked them down. I am now living them. I'm seeing what's happening here. B7. Okay, but queen a7, there's no threat. B7 came to play. The queen is hanging on
Rook
a7.
c8, b7. It's still possible to blunder. We know how resilient
Wait,
Sarana
is there a kind of a draw with queen d7, queen g4? No, the king just sits on h8.
F5 maybe? Oh, yeah, the king on h8.
But then if queen h5, like, do you actually get out of that?
Yeah. No, I agree. Now, he's going to c6. He's trying to create connected passers. This is not far
Queen
from
d7,
over.
queen d7, the rook's hanging.
But rook b8 and then king f8.
So b7, if you move your queen, it's queen c8
queen
check.
a7.
You have to be careful. So queen a7, there's queen g4, queen c8, back and forth.
Or queen d6.
Queen d6 is also hanging with e5 to fall.
Prophylaxis.
Knight f1, knight e3. Can I bring my knight in, or
nice
do I give my
positional ideas? But does that allow checks?
That's what I'm worried about. Oh my gosh, so much is happening. Queen e7 to go queen g5 also is a possibility.
Okay, but now queen g1 is possible. King c2, I get king e2.
But watch out for queen c8. So wait, queen c8. It's a queen d8.
And then knight c4. Who's winning there? Takes a
queen
knight
c6.
c4,
Queen c6. Yeah, knight c4 is coming.
Okay, but I thought maybe you could take and go knight c4, but he wants to do it anyway. Queen e7. It's a repetition.
Queen c8 check. Queen c7. Queen c7. Keep the rook under attack. Queen.
I would take and go knight c4.
Oh my gosh, take a knight c4. You win the d6 pawn by force.
But that's not over because black has the h pawn. Who is winning there? There might be a repetition, another draw. King moves. I suggest king moves.
So he plays h4, knight c4, h3. The king's
King f1, and then the queen comes to g5. I think black sacrifices on b8 and promotes.
Oh man. So king f1, h2. He doesn't. So take
knight takes
d6.
d6.
Took with the queen. And now the knight comes in and replaces the queen. But then
h2.
Wait, take on e5? Oh, you take on
b7. But
b7.
then takes b7. Queen g2 and h2. Queen a5. Who's winning?
I think the black just wins. You're getting queen with check. Getting queen with check.
Unbelievable.
Queen h2,
he wins. The knight stops the pawn.
That's unreal. Everything worked out perfectly. And if you are Sarana, you resign. Stop playing this game. Resign. There he goes.
He does. He's frustrated, but 15 minutes left on the match clock. Plenty of time. It's a one-point game, but this is where you have to stop the bleeding if you're Alexei.
Yes, and, well, where's the next game?
Where's the next game?
They got a
rematch. It's not 15 minutes a bullet, it's 30.
Yeah, I don't know what just happened, but it's like 10 seconds came up.
I think the server might have... No, okay, no. It's not.
Oh.
No, it might be, because on my end, it's glitching a little bit.
No, but I see now all of a sudden Sarana has full, and it's Sevian who has... But I think that was both players temporarily.
Yeah.
I see it right now. Both players connections are struggling there.
Indeed.
So
it
let's
seems
see
now
what's happening.
Sarana is back, but he's got 30 seconds. He's got to move.
I'm going to ask for confirmation just to see what's happening. And it looks like team is dealing with behind the scenes, seeing what's going on with the players. We will await their word, but right now, I mean, Danya, this has been as close a match as you could ask for, and the game was just canceled. Okay, so the players will restart this, and I'm sure the time will be added back to the match clock, and that way it's all fair. So it seemed like it was a mutual problem, not just one player. Maybe it was a quick little server reboot, but hopefully we get the games going very shortly here, and both players still seated, getting ready for the next game.
Indeed. And this happens. But Robert, I need to catch my breath. There's some of my friends watching the match texting me about this game. That was crazy.
And yeah, I mean, this has been pretty crazy. It looks like the players are in communication with the team who's doing such a great job behind the scenes, making sure that everything's okay. And we do have liftoff. So that was a very quick fix.
Smooth.
Thank you, Mira, Jake, Bick, everybody who's helping out. Thank you so much for that. And we do have the next game. Everything seems to be right. And we have a fianchetto. So a slower approach from Sevian from an opening standpoint, but he does have a one-game lead.
Indeed. And I also have to add my shout out. Such a professional job always done by the people behind the scenes. We'll thank them properly at the end, but this would all not be possible without them. Okay, so yeah, I like White's position here because of the c5 square. There is a lack of equivalency between the c5 square on the one hand, but the c4 square is not accessible, obviously, because White is a pawn on b3. I think White is a slight pull, but it's not that significant.
Right, because knight d3 is play. You do not want to allow a trade with the side that has slightly less space. In this case, it's black with a bit less space, and you want to somehow get your c3 knight to c5. So do not play b4 if you're black. That is just, well, now you might play b4.
Whoa. Pin, gotta watch out.
But I think that giving the a4 and c5 square is not advisable.
Bishop f8. So on the other hand, black has more space. This position
Knight
is
c5.
thought of.
Knight c5.
Whoa, yeah.
You can't take.
That's the thing. And look at that diagonal. The bishop has left the long diagonal. So black has to reckon with that. Bishop b5?
So bishop b5, you still can't take next
The
move.
rook is hanging, though. It's close.
And he plays knight f4. Look at that. He's like, you can't take me. The knight on f6 is always hanging over here. Knight f4 to d3, reinforce that pony. He takes on d7. That
Bit of a bailout, no? Knight d3.
But why do you have to take on d7? Couldn't you just bring the knight to d3 first?
Right, keep the tension. Now he's reorienting himself toward the queen side. Look at the c-file, though. It isn't under white's control because rook takes c2 can be met with queen takes c2. So he's increasing the pressure, adding the Tabasco sauce. But is it enough?
Okay, he's bringing the bishop in. Watch out for a sack on e6 at the right moment. So that's why Sarana brings the bishop to d6.
Another idea is to play at some point e4 all of these central breaks, but will they make them happen, or will white overextend himself? He can take on f4 and take on h5.
He can. And I'm looking at rook c5 for white at some point. Not now, of course, because the knight is hanging, but you can sack.
But look at the bishop on h3. Watch out, because g4 could come into play. You cannot play knight d3.
Oh my gosh, it's trapped. And you can't play knight e2 either for the same reason.
What do you do? Do you take on e6? Do you bite the bullet?
He does take on e6, which is pawn takes, bishop
e6. No, but
e6.
this is lost.
No, of course. Take on c1, play queen e8.
Queen e8.
Queen e8 and then queen e4. Here it comes.
h5 hangs. He did too much Tabasco sauce.
And the bishop's still trapped if it went over to h3. Oh, and look, he trades off a piece.
It ain't over till it's over. g4, though, carving out those light squares.
Yeah, the queen g4 check. Okay, queen g4 anyway. The c7 square is covered. Queen f5 threatening queen f3. You can go knight g4. He plays knight d5. You can also trade queens and win the game here.
Huge win, Robert, for Sarana. And one felt that perhaps he released the tension too early. I felt like Sevian had that chance with his knight on c5. You called it. I think he went in the wrong direction there. It is still a tight match with 11 minutes to go. We got a Banco Gambit another change. I know Sevian likes this opening. He's been playing it since he was very young.
He does indeed. It's a pawn sacrifice, but you get such good piece play, and in bullet in particular, that is good for the side that has the easier plan. So the pawn has been lost, or sacrificed, I should say, and there are just under 11 minutes on the match clock. Whoa, knight g5, giving up the e6 pawn. Now knight c7 play to defend that square is more important to not allow the knight in taking this bishop off the board.
Indeed. And these positions are as crazy as it gets. The Banco has become a little bit less popular recently, but that does not mean it's not a good bullet weapon. But does not seem like a good bullet weapon right now. Look at what's happening to Sevian's position.
I mean, look at this bishop on c3 as well.
Queen e6 mate was a threat.
So how many? You don't have a pawn for the exchange. I was looking to count.
Yeah, you have the center.
You have the center, but you don't actually have material for the exchange, right? It's
and Sarana saying, ladies and gentlemen, pass pawn, star of the show, red carpet, unrolled, a6 coming. This is looking very bad.
It certainly is, and now you can even play queen into b5. Well, now you can't because the pawn came to c4. But rook a4 hits the c4 pawn. Behind it is the d4 pawn. Both of them are weak. And if you ever play rook c8, well, thank you for removing your rook from the path of my pawn.
Indeed. d3, queen g4. Unsustainable is the pawn motion for black because he just doesn't have enough resources to hold everything together. a6, convincing confidence. And again, the opening prowess of Sarana coming into play here, even though it's the bullet, that extra edge, Robert, in knowing the opening, knowing the theory. Now here, still some hurdles to cross. That a4 rook is hanging, and d1 is going to be hanging after that.
That's true, because I want to play queen e6 check, but I need to also maybe play rook d1 to a1, or do I bring rook a to a1? Tough question. Do you want to double your rooks behind the pawn? He does, so he can play a7, a8, and a7.
a7.
Yeah, rook a6. Rook a6, queen e6 check coming.
Yeah, he's holding him down here.
And if you trade queens, you're just completely lost.
But then d2, I would argue that's not so simple. I wouldn't go queen e6 yet. I would go, yeah.
So centralization, hitting the d5 pawn. You can also play rook a5 to win d5.
Queen e4 creates a bit of a pawn diamond there. Now you play slowly, g3 or h3. I would just throw that in there so you don't have to worry. But bishop g7 needs to be reckoned with as well. He does do this.
Bishop g7, this queen e5 hangs the queen. I was trying to get my queen to b8, but I gave
queen f4 though. Your idea is absolutely right.
Yes. So bishop g7, I move my queen away.
Bishop takes b2. You sack the other rook. You bank on your pawns. That doesn't work though.
No, because my queen on b8 also takes b2 back.
Nice. He does this. Queen b6 is even better. Queen b7.
Yes, queen b7, rook b6.
b2, and you come around for the pawns. He's got to resign and start the next game. 8 minutes. Same logic as the previous game. Rook d6 wins.
Oh, rook d6 is so nice. Removing the guard of this rook on a8, and then you're getting your queen.
Amazing again here by Sevian. And now the ball passed back into Sam's court. He's trying everything he can. Resigns. 8 minutes on the clock. This is another pivotal game, Robert, as the lead shifts to Alexei Sarana.
And Sam actually seems very calm right now. Maybe he's
Both of them
convincing
do.
himself to be calm, but nerves must be real. Sarana's up a game right now. We have no Sicilian. This is going to get sharp. So lines like this, the queen can often come to g3, but not so fast because knight h5 would hit the queen on g3 and the pawn f4.
F5. Now, this could backfire if black gets d5. And this is an old idea that has been around a long time. Now, if white can play bishop g5, takes f6, and plant a knight on d5, a couple of classical games have gone this way. Things are very unpleasant to Sarana, understandably, but still, look at that d5 square. That is how the battle is going to be decided.
Oh,
I
bishop
like
f6,
this. I
knight
like
d5.
what Sam is doing.
Queen g3 coming, g5, the d4 pawn's hanging as well. Whoa.
But bishop takes f5.
Oh, bishop f5 was missed.
Oh, that was a
knight d5
huge opportunity.
So f6, get rid of that pawn. Don't hang it anymore.
Bishop c again. Bishop f5.
But there's the e5 pawn.
Still, though, I would do it again. He misses
The
it.
d4 was hanging earlier as well because the queen has not been defended.
Now look at the positional sack. He's going to plant a rook on e4, a blockading rook. Now he's going to redirect his attention to the attack. I don't see what Sarana can do here to throw water onto the fire.
Right, because if you play g6, in comes h5. h5 anyway. Look at how quickly Sevian is playing this. Knight h4, knight f5. Bring that knight. Oh, boy.
Tightening the screws, chiseling his way inside the paint. Knight f5 and g6 even.
He takes first because knight f5, knight h6 check, or queen f3 hitting f7.
This is crushing, absolutely crushing. And what a performance here by Sevian, tying the match, it seems, but let's not jinx him. Sarana can generate chances in any position.
And that was a must by Sevian, was blockading the light squares. He gave him a pawn,
G6.
but said the control is good enough. Ooh, f7 is under attack, queen f3 or g6, as you're saying. Look good. He plays g6. I have some slight concern if this rook on e7 can come to g7 or h7.
Completely echoed. Yeah, agreed. But I think it's a case where all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah, knight f7 check always available. Oh my gosh, and you take on h7 with check, rook h4, rook h8 mate. It's just a very forcing sequence.
No, you did.
If you play rook g7, knight f7 check. Knight f7 still. Just throw that pony in there. G takes. And then rook g4, rook g8 mate. Thank you.
Yeah,
good game, rook
rook
g4.
g4.
It's mate. By force.
Okay, queen h6 is a symbolic check.
Ooh.
Okay.
Okay, well, you
Now,
can't take
I'm
on
not
f7.
sure about this one. Rook e5.
I think you're pretty sure now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I was always sure. You have a problem with being sure? Do we need to replace the commentator here in the last 5 minutes?
We might, because it's just, this is really riling me up. The
Yeah, well,
intensity
it seems that
of the book.
we have quite the argument here. I mean, this is ridiculous.
And if you're Sevian, you tie the matchup. If you are Sarana, you're looking at the match clock. Probably not right now because you're in the middle of a pretty.
No, he's looking. He's not even looking at the position.
But I'm looking at it. So 5 minutes remaining, and if you're Sarana, like this is going back and forth at this point. How are you feeling after a loss?
It's like, it reminds me of, and I've made some comparisons to basketball. But you know that situation when you go for what's called a 2-for-1. 30 seconds left in the game, and the match is how you throw up a shot so that you will have at least another one guaranteed. Now, this is actually getting a little bit interesting here.
I think the A pawn's too fast.
Yeah, A5 and
oh, wait,
A6.
go king h3 first, or king h1.
Nice move.
Because
Amazing.
that's pinned. You do not want to allow rook check, so then the pawn just goes. A6, rook takes d6 is the threat with the rook takes d6. Don't play a7, which is still winning.
Yeah,
rook
takes d6. So now there are at least, I think, 2 more games guaranteed, right? How does Sarana play this? I don't think he plays it. He plays it like a regular game. He's not trying to play particularly fast. But Robert, we've seen these players. They have just naturally played very, very fast and very confidently, which is crazy.
And I just love this image. They're going back and forth, as you see, with the dancing heads. And this line with the c7 pawn is captured.
Yeah.
Once again, black, and this is Sam Sevian, gets the activity for the material. And there is a game, and I still always forget, was it Nakamura versus Caruana? It might have been Carlsen. I don't remember who it was.
I think all of them have played this.
Yeah, it's a pawn sacrifice where you take on f1, the king has to take, and then you can bring your rooks to the c file. So he does just that.
I think I'm more nervous than the players are. My heart is beating right now. I feel like I'm entering a final exam in college or something. This is what we came here for. King d3. Wait a second. That rook might be trapped.
There's rook to b5 back. So
Okay, so this is a little bit drawish. Now, who is better in this situation? I like the knight. I like white central control, but I don't think the advantage is particularly significant if it exists at all.
Well, this pawn a3 was hanging. There was rook a1, rook takes a7, so just returning that pawn. So that's why he didn't do it. And this position is definitely better for white. You have a knight on a light square, can't be attacked.
A5
E4,
also.
D5 type of ideas. You have A5. I think I just heard you say that. And this is just favorable for Sarana for sure.
You can push and look at the times where this is hard to defend. He makes progress first. He's got to watch out. Now, F5 is an idea. No, this is actually looking really, really bad for black. I didn't even realize the extent of it, Robert. Now I
but
think
he
it's
kicks the rook away, and he's going to take on F5 and play G6, I think.
Uh-huh.
Trade some pieces. Here comes G6.
Nice. Good call. He takes an E4, though.
Oh, I didn't like that move because the G pawn is
93, 95.
cemented. Oh, gosh. Here comes the knight to the D5 square.
Still, B4 and bishop D6. How exactly does white make progress? You put the bishop on D6 first, more flexible.
Okay, so I'm looking at an eventual rook to G1. Not yet, doesn't do too much of anything. But king D7, maybe then a rook G1, and then knight D5 threatens the F6 pawn because the G pawn will be pinned.
Rook A1. Okay, so he's trying to open up that angle, gearing himself up. He closes it back down, but the C4 square is weak and the knight can come there. B3 is pushing that pawn forward.
I was going to say, don't play A5 because the knight would come right to C4 to attack it. And he's trying to get the A...
King C3 threat, big threat.
No, but rook B5. That way bishop B4 check. And to win this, bishop B4.
When he misses it, he's got to go back. And now bishop A5, that might
Bishop A5, I think you're holding.
You are.
And white's still better even there,
Yeah.
but I think the black king just goes right back to F8, and once it gets there, it protects G7. He goes
now pawn
E7.
endgame could be trouble because E5, E6 creates a protected pass. So he doesn't do it. He shies away after a long
G6, look at that move. He's trying to open the fifth rank for the rook swing over to H5.
Indeed.
That's a good idea. And
now if Sarana take and king C3, what do you do?
King C3, there is bishop B4 checking it.
Again,
yeah. You can go back.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I'm curious about is there a timely rook G1 trying to get the G6 pawn?
B2, king C2. You use the king to stop the pawn, the rook to attack.
But you can't take on G6 just yet, right? Because then you play B2. So you have to...
It's not after F5, maybe you do
king
something
E8?
with this one tempo you have.
You also have king E8. There he goes. King E8 to go to
Nasty.
F7 to protect the pawn.
Very deep, and you called it king C3.
Okay.
Bishop B4 and bishop C5. What a catch! You could actually still do it and go knight D6 at the end, but the rook is protected.
Right, so king B3, bishop C5 check. It's back. King B2 looks like the only move. He goes king D3. So maybe that wasn't the only move, but it worries me to move away from that pawn.
Robert, 1 minute in. They're going to have one more game probably after this one. How will this game end? They're shuffling their pieces around.
This game might not end for a minute, actually. So this could potentially be
the
our
last
final
game.
Rook G2, hitting the G6 pawn. Don't take it because B2, bishop B4 check. Now king B3.
Now he takes.
Uh-oh. The G6
now
pawn
G6
is falling.
going to fall.
F5, play F5. At some point, play F5.
He's got to watch the clock, too. He's got to resign if this gets lost.
Yes, he does. There's 38 seconds left.
Oh, and now a fork on B7 is a threat.
The rook C1, great move.
Rook A7.
Bishop G3 at some point. I don't know when.
Rook,
oh
where
my
do you
gosh.
go? Rook A6. Now this is a push. I would actually consider resigning this.
I would consider as well. But 25 seconds left. Bishop G3 played. Knight F7. He goes back to C4. Rook C3. Keep challenging his knight.
He has got to be aware of the clock. He's got to resign it.
And
he's got to resign it.
Rook takes F6. It's another pawn. If that pawn falls, there's 12 seconds left.
He doesn't see the clock. The rook B6. Is this a draw? Is this a win?
And he's got 1 second. He barely gets enough. Resign. He's got to resign.
Resign.
He's got to resign. Resign. He did it. He did it. He resigned. He gets one more game. He resigned with 2 seconds left.
Saw it.
Oh my gosh.
Now
he
a
barely
must
gets
win
this
with the
off.
white pieces.
Oh my gosh. I've never been so happy to see somebody resign in my life.
Buzzer beater.
In a game that's not my own. So we have the Sicilian once again. It was Sevian who played a great game, pushes the pawn to F5. Same exact variation. Sarana thinks it plays D5, but is it good
he
here?
doesn't take on D3 this time.
Is it good? Because their E5 pawn is hanging as well.
Yeah.
So this is a...
I think ED is a move here, and then the E5 pawn hangs, but you get liquidation there. He has to win this game. He's down by a point. This is the last one.
Okay, so the E5 pawn is falling, and then when the E5 pawn falls, the bishop on F5 is under attack. So knight takes E5. Wait, isn't this just an extra pawn?
It is bishop F4, but okay, the pawns are weak. Bishop D6 is an idea, but there's a big initiative on top of the pawn. White has to keep this initiative stoked to D4 to keep the knight supported. What will he do here? D4 looks good.
Okay, I was thinking of just taking on G6, but he wants to keep the knight in the center. Makes sense. Bishop can't move because he needs to protect the F6 knight.
Yep.
And Queen D6 played. Do I take on G6?
Knight C4.
Do I take and then fill the square with my queen on E5? Like, can I replace it?
Cash in that. Maybe you do. Yeah, knight uses queen D5. I quite like that idea. But knight takes D5 at the end. There's
no, but there's knight C7 to fork.
Oh, you devil.
Oh, I had that covered. You've been great with the tactics today, but
no, so have you.
Every now and then I got this. The knight is pinned. F7 is falling.
Okay, this is very hard to play, Robert, with the black piece. But look at the time. 15 seconds extra for Sarana. That could make its presence felt.
Yeah, and I'm knight takes
into that right
now. Knight G4.
But
just take and put your knight right back.
Exactly.
And then the bishop comes to
F6.
F6.
Stabilizes the situation.
Yeah, this is actually...
He's got to move.
This is the last game. He knows that. He's trying to figure this out. Rook E1, okay, I like that. You didn't have to rush back to e5, and that way the bishop cannot get to f6.
I like
That's a good move.
The knights here are there's so many outposts. The c6 square create a3 stopping b4.
Oh, now knight's coming to c6. This is not
it is.
because bishop f6, knight c6.
There we go.
And
so they're not holding it together. H3.
Can you,
what do you do?
Trade rooks on e8 and then play rook e1?
I don't see a way to make progress. Yeah, I think you have to do. They have to fight for the e file. That's what he does. He wants to double.
Yeah. So what's happening here?
Okay. He does double. He gets the e file, but Sarana creates that hole for the king on h7.
But there's a knight e7 at some point. Not now because rook to e8, but that's why the king went to h7. And here we look at the position. White is much better here.
He is. H3, prudent, but he creates a weakness on g3. There is a downside to it. Oh, he trades the bishops. This is
That's important. That's important.
He's making progress.
So he's protecting the d5 pawn with rook
He is.
f5, but you don't even need to because there's no way to double on the pawn. The knight c6 is too powerful. Oh, I like this move, rook f3. You can play g4, king g2 if you want, or g3, king g2.
Yeah.
So, okay, what now? Queen f5. Love that move. Off of the queen trade. Okay, queen back. He doesn't want to give the rook e8. Good move, keeping control of the files.
Knight e5, shifting it around. f7 under pressure. Knight g4 is an idea here.
Rook c3, coming to c6 with the rook.
But Sarana
rook c5. Rook c5. Good move.
Look at
the
the outpost.
Protected.
Rook e8 by Sarana. Rook e8, rook c6.
So rook c6 anyway,
Queen
because
f5.
you're gaining ground. Queen f5 is also very good. Rook
Be
c8.
careful,
Trade the
the
rooks.
knight is
Trade the
hanging.
rooks. Oh, I thought you trade the rooks there.
Now this is dangerous. The bishop h4, something like that. The white's king is weak. He has to give it on the king. Knight back to e5.
Okay, queen f4. I don't like the retreat, but maybe he felt it was necessary.
5 seconds for Sevian.
Oh my gosh, this is so tough. Queen c7 though doesn't attack anything. Rook c7, there's no threat.
He gives the pawn.
Oh, that's such an important pawn.
This is a huge blow. Bishop takes d4.
Trade queens? Ah, it doesn't look good for him.
No, it's still, I think he's maintaining some pressure.
Queen d6 now, of course.
Okay, but look at that f5 squared. Is that significant? Takes d4 though. I don't see it happening.
No, because when you take on d4, the rook takes with check.
h4, but the knight can, wherever there is a knight, there are chances. But Sarana defending so well here.
You need the knight to come to f5, right? Somehow.
Yep,
he brings the knight to h2. Knight g4, bishop b2, and the f5
that
check.
Is jumpy to e3. That f5 square is weak. f5 check though. f5 check.
Oh, you can't take it because rook e6. It's so important.
This is a huge blow. This is looking very tough now for Sevian. He needs to win this game.
And how is he going to win this? The knight's going back to f1.
Only by a fork.
Rook e1 is possible at some point. Actually, the knight's nowhere to go.
Yep,
so rook e1 looks very good.
Knight e3. Oh, king c3 trying to trap the knight, but back to
e6. Look at that. He realized the king on the c file no longer the rook on c8 hits the c1 square. He's trying desperately. Knight f4 check. Don't fall for that.
Don't knight d4.
Hey, rook c6. Okay, he went rook f6. So he saw that.
You gotta keep trying here. If you're 7, you gotta keep the knight preserved. Then f4, f4, and f3, and you're just gonna force a trade here. Knight f4.
You were looking at rook g8, rook g6, but bishop
g5.
Very important. No, this is it.
That's basically it.
This is it.
That's it. And you've got to try something like rook.
There's just no way to lose this if you're.
There is no way to lose this. Yeah, you don't want to
too much time. Play rook a6. You know, just hope for the pre-move.
No, you have to try that, but.
Yeah, it's over.
You got to take on b3, but no.
It's over. G2, and this is it.
And wow.
Alexei Sarana wins the matchup.
Look at him, pumped up. As he should be. The clutch game with black, and what an effort by Sevian. Amazing job and the presence of mind to resign. I know this sounds ridiculous, and then a fantastic effort, and it came down right to the wire. What a match. What a match.
There were so many brilliant moves over the board, but the resignation was maybe the most of all, realizing it with just 2 seconds on the clock. But all credit to Alexei Sarana for winning this match. It was so back and forth. Nerves must have been just like overwhelming, and yet he did keep his composure in the end. He wins the match 13.5 and 11.5. We're going to take a short technological recess because when we come back, we will be joined by the players for a post-match interview. I am so looking forward to hearing their thoughts because there's just so many jitters. We'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned. And after an exhilarating finish, we are joined by the players. First and foremost, Alexei, huge congratulations. I have to ask you, how nervous were you down the stretch of the match?
Okay, thank you very much. It was a really nervous match because I think I played this match really good, but sometimes I was really good preparing in the opening, and then I don't know, something happened in the time troubles. So and Sam come back, and in the bullet I just think that I am big outsider. So I'm really happy how it happens. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations, Alexei and Sam. That was a fantastic match by you. So many amazing games. And, you know, this may sound weird, but we were actually impressed with the presence of mind you had in the penultimate game, resigning it just as the clock expired, giving yourself one more game. Were you sort of aware of that specifically? And on a more general note, what are your thoughts about the match? Sort of what do you feel went well? What do you feel didn't go as well?
For the first question, I saw that there was 8 minutes left, and there were 2 games left, and I felt I had to resign as fast as possible that game. And for the match, I mean, he said he was very well prepared, especially in this Nimzo E4 line. He had an idea in almost every game. Yeah, basically what went wrong was in the bullet. That Benko game, I just lost really quickly, and that probably was the reason.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And you obviously had a good shot even in the final game, but in bullet, anything can happen. Well, Alexei, it seemed like earlier in the match things were starting to go your way. You were gaining some confidence, but then the match kept getting even. When you had a lead, it then went to even. So, how did you keep your composure and manage your way through that? Because nerves and just the tension of winning and losing, it must get to you a little bit, right?
Mhm. Yes, okay. It's really hard when you lost your leading. So I just I just play the games. Sometimes I tilt it but but I think I play more. Wasn't so tilted. I missed. I miscalculate not too much I think so. And this was important that even if after loses, I miscalculate not so in many so games.
Yeah.
Well, Alexei, before we let you go, both of you go for a deserved rest. You're playing Jeffrey Zhang on Sunday. I'm sure you're very well familiar with Jeffrey. Do you have any thoughts on Jeffrey and how you might approach that oncoming match?
Okay, in this tournament, Jeffrey is the most higher rated player and much more famous than others. So I think that he is favorite of the tournament. I don't know what to do with him in the next match. So I try to play, but I think he's big favorite.
Wow.
But here he won matches not so easily. So maybe so everyone had chances against him.
It's true, and you're a very strong player, obviously, and the modesty is certainly noticed. But Alexei, congratulations to you and Sam. Sorry that the match didn't go your way, and hope to see you maybe in the Super Swiss Blitz event tomorrow and throughout the weekend. But you did put up such a great showing, and it made for a very fun match.
Well done, both of you.
And thanks to both of our players for what was, I mean, honestly, one of the absolute most fun matches I've ever covered. A resignation with 2 seconds on the match clock, just prolonging it, giving it another game. And as we see, Alexis Sarana moves into the semifinals. He's so humble, Danya. I mean, you just heard him there. He's like, Jeffrey's more famous. He's well known. He's the big favorite. But maybe I have some chances. Some. I think he has plenty of chances.
I mean, I love that about all of these players is how humble they are. They let their moves do the talking, and they put such effort into each and every match. And definitely, I think Alexei, he definitely has a chance. He He displayed some amazing chess. He'll go back through the games. I'm sure he'll analyze them. He'll prepare. We know about his opening preparation now. That is going to be a scintillating match, but not to downplay the effort, of course, of Sam Sevian, who put on a fantastic display, and it literally came down to the last second.
It really did. And for Sam, while his JSCC run comes to conclusion, he has a chance to make the Speed Chess Championship. That is a huge goal for all these players. And the tournament begins tomorrow with the Speed Chess Super Swiss have an opportunity to make his way into the big SCC, where you can play the likes of Hikaru Nakamura and
easy win.
Fellow superstar grandmasters. I'm sure Wesley So and Ishigiri, all of them will make their presence very much felt in the Speed Chess Championship. But for now, Donya, we have 4 semifinalists. Jeffrey Zhang takes on Alexei Sarana. On the other side of the bracket, we will have Nihal Sarin taking on Haik Martirosyan. It's just so much fun, is it not?
Every match, the time just flies by. These games, each and every one of them, amazing action, so close, so much tactics, so much just tension, and so much effort, so much preparation. We've got all of the ingredients of one amazing match after another. And these matches are good in and of themselves. But you know what makes them better for me? Commentating with the likes of Grandmaster Robert Hess. So it really always is a huge pleasure to cover these matches with you, as well as to cover them alongside the thousands of fans across various platforms.
Absolutely. And we often joke at each other's expense, but honestly, the hours flew by today. I'm looking at the clock on my computer here. I'm like, whoa, it's already? We've been doing this for almost 4 hours now, but it's such a joy. And matches like that. I mean, we talked yesterday, the matchup between Nihal Sarin and Anton Smirnov. That was great fun. This one felt even more exhilarating just because it was down to the wire. It wasn't clear who was going to win the match until literally the very last game. So, I mean, what a pleasure, what a joy it is. We're spoiled, honestly.
We really are. Every match
this kind of opportunity
exceeds the previous. I mean, every single match is a story, is a narrative, and it's so much fun. But unfortunately, this one comes to an end. On the bright side, we have, of course, a very big tournament over the weekend, and we have 2 more semifinals, Robert, that are bound to be as exciting as it gets.
They certainly will. So on that note, you've done a great job thanking everybody, but I want to reiterate your thanks and just really give a big shout out to all of our viewers who continue to make this such a successful run in the Junior Speed Chess Championship. For now, the action does come to a close. We will come back very shortly with the semifinals and ultimately to determine the champion. Tomorrow will be the Super Swiss, part of the Speed Chess Championship qualification process. But it's time for us to say goodbye. This was the Junior Speed Chess Championship quarterfinals, brought to you by Chess.com and ChessKid.com. Until next time, everybody.